This week, Mimi Herrmann joins us for our feature interview for this week's episode. Our technical segment is part 2 of our continuing series. Well, this will be the last part in the series. Staying secure at hacker conferences, which is always fun. We've got the next 10 items. There were 20 in total. We're going to do the 11 through 20 on this show, which should be fun. In the security news, advances in ad blocking. And those of you that have heard me on the show before know that I hate ads for a lot of reasons. Security, one of them. So this is kind of interesting. BGP hijacking. A murder victim is into the investigation, entered the Fitbit and how that affected a murder investigation. The lack of security talent that is afflicting healthcare today, largely based on a talk that Josh Corman gave at Source yesterday, which I actually attended and actually participated in, which is kind of strange. So some Microsoft exploits from our friends at Endgame and two-factor authentication bypass for LastPass and so much more. All that and more on this episode of Paul's Security Weekly. This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show where exploits run wild, packets aren't the only things getting sniffed, and the cocktails flow steady. It's Paul's Security Weekly. Brought to you by Onapsis is the leading provider of solutions to protect ERP systems from cyber attacks. Customers can secure their SAP and Oracle business-critical platforms from espionage, sabotage, and financial fraud risks. Visit them on the web at onapsis.com. IT Pro TV, an easy, entertaining approach to online IT training. Stream over 2,000 hours of up-to-date, high-quality video content live and on demand. For a free 7-day trial and for a limited time, get 50% off a monthly membership for the lifetime of your active subscription. Visit itpro.tv/Security Weekly and use the code SW50. Logarithm's Netmon Freemium delivers real-time network visibility to quickly identify emerging threats in your IT environment. Netmon Freemium is a free commercial-grade network forensics and traffic analytics solution. You can use Netmon Freemium's powerful capabilities to search against all observed network traffic, identify abnormal traffic patterns and application usage, and quickly analyze full packet captures. Take the first step towards real-time network visibility. Visit logarithm.com/freemium to learn more and download it today. Endgame automates the hunt for both known and never-before-seen adversaries in enterprise networks. Built on unique knowledge on the adversary's tools, techniques, and tactics, Endgame's centrally managed agent prevents, detects, and responds to advanced adversaries in the earliest stages of the kill chain without prior knowledge. Endgame, automate the hunt. Welcome, everyone, to Paul's Security Weekly. This is episode 511, and it is, in fact, April 27th, 2017, I hope. And on the lines via Skype, we've got, Mr. Carlos Perez is here with us. Carlos, welcome to the show.
Hey, Paul. Happy to be here.
Yes, I'm glad you're here to round out our illustrious panel. We got some Microsoft stuff that, I always like when you come here because one reason is you're a wealth of knowledge in Windows stuff, as is Joff Thayer, who's here with us as well. Welcome, Joff.
G'day, Paul. It's good to be here again on this fine Thursday evening. Happy to be back with you on Security Weekly.
Just looking at Carlos's camera, and there's like pregnant lady and a little baby walking by in the background. That was pretty funny. That's awesome, Carlos. Congratulations again on your expanding family. It's awesome.
Oh, yeah, 12 days to go.
12 days. Wow. You're expecting another. Wow. You're a brave man, Carlos Perez.
I find it's funny that like
Billy.
within our circle of many of our friends in security that were similar in age, and a lot of us have small children and have a lot of funny stories to share about that. Dave, Kenny, and I are always like doing the comparison of like what kind of illness we picked up from our children. I think lately he might have me beat. He might have me. He got the pink eye and I didn't get the pink eye. So.
Oh yeah, he got struts and
strep and I had strep and pink eye in the same time. So he had me beat there.
Wow, I remember those days. Every single disease that came around the corner. I feel for you. I don't have to deal with that anymore because my kids are teenaged and older. But I know what you're going through.
It's all good. It's all good, though. Liz, speaking of conferences, we just did. I have a blog post in the works. We did 4 conferences in the span of just about a month. I presented a different presentation at 3 of them, and one of them I presented twice. So I did a lot of speaking lately, a lot of conferences lately where we did Hacker Movie Trivia. So we're working on a blog post that summarizes all of that. For all of you asking for my slides, we are going to publish those. We have that all in the works. We're publishing probably... over 70 videos, maybe mini interviews that we recorded at the conferences. So more on that. But a conference coming up later this year is Wild West Hackin' Fest. It's put on by Red Team specialists for anybody, excuse me, and everybody interested in information security. Join us, because I will be there as well, October 27th and 28th for hands-on hardware hacking talks by famous InfoSecers like Dave Kennedy, Deviant Egypt, Chris Nickerson, Chris Gates, Mike Poore, and Sub T. Check them out online at wildwesthackinfest.com. That's wildwesthackin, Hackin fest.com. Joff and Carlos, are you planning to attend this fabulous conference?
I absolutely am. I am so looking forward to Wild West Hacking Fest. I think it's going to be a fabulous experience, and we're just going to have such a great time.
After you mentioned Sub T, now I'm going like, damn, I have to go.
Yes, you got to be there, Carlos.
I have to try to make two. And Sub T has to be one of those security specialists in the last year and a half that I've every tweet that he makes, I quickly go in, click on the link, whatever he posts, every gist, everything, I have to try it out in my lab. He has provided such a wealth of knowledge and bypassing, whitelisting applications, objects, all kinds of very nice tradecraft out of him.
It's interesting, Carlos. I used some of the Sub-T mechanisms with some extra custom special sauce that in C# that I wrote on a recent Red Team, and it was absolutely fabulously successful. So I owe a debt of gratitude to Sub-T, and I'm really looking forward to meeting him and discussing that.
Fantastic. I'd like to introduce our special guest for this evening. Mimi Herrmann is here with us. Mimi, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm really excited to be here.
Yes, it's nice to have you, and you've been working in the industry for 20 years, which is awesome. I'm just not that far behind you at 17, so it's awesome that you've been in this fabulous industry for that. I mean, well, even like 15 or so years ago, there really wasn't a lot of security official roles at a lot of companies, which is kind of interesting how we've progressed. So how did you get your start in information security?
Well, it actually happened back in the 90s. A friend of mine, John McMahon, he's one of the guys who discovered and shut down the wank worm, moved from the startup we'd been working at to a company called Trusted Information Systems, which might be a familiar name. They've been mostly a government and defense contractor. They spun off into a commercial company after the Firewall Toolkit, which Marcus Ranum wrote. And that took off. It became a commercial success. So they decided to kind of spin into a commercial company. And I joined TIS shortly after John did. And I just found that I had this huge passion for information security. I couldn't get enough. So everything that was learnable, I was trying to learn. So that was kind of it. And it's really all John's fault. You should have him on your show because
absolutely.
he's right.
Absolutely. Where did your career kind of go from there? From the early, what roles have you had in various companies and things like that?
Well, I've worked for a lot of vendors. Let me see. I worked for TIS. I worked for McAfee a couple of different times. I worked for Tenable for a little while.
You did? Did we work at Tenable together?
Yeah, I was trying to get onto your team, actually.
Oh, that's hilarious.
Yeah, I was a sales engineer, and honestly, it didn't work out. I didn't mesh very well with the team, and I think part of the reason for that was there don't tend to be a lot of women in sales, and because I was on, I was post sales. I was doing sales engineering, but still, it's a sales thing, and I guess there was just not a lot of personality meshing, so it didn't really work out, but it kind of upset me because I was trying to move over to the content team at the time, and I was kind of hoping that would happen before they let me go, and it did not. But oh well.
That was early on when I joined Tenable, and when there was a content team. So that's interesting. Yeah. Yeah.
Everything changed right after that, which is maybe the reason why it didn't work out. So.
Gotcha. And so, what do you do today, Mimi?
I work for a company called AAMVA. They're a nonprofit, and they basically, if you go into a DMV or an MVA in the States or in parts of Canada, and you either want to get a driver's license, either commercial or just a regular user's driver's license, or you want to register a car, they're the people whose systems are behind that. So a lot of people don't know that. I didn't know it before I joined. But
yeah, so there's a standard. So for every DMV in the U.S., there's a standard system?
Well, not all states participate, but the government the federal government is kind of pushing them more towards it. So the Real ID Act was part of that. I know a lot of people hate Real ID. And in fact, as someone who is very into privacy, I wasn't real happy about it at the time. But the states that participate in that use our service. Again, if you're looking up a title or just a VIN, when you're trying to buy a car or register it, you're using our service.
I got you. And now, does law enforcement use your service as well?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, the DOJ uses it. Law enforcement in general uses it. So, and a lot of people just don't even know it exists. That's kind of funny.
And so your role is to help secure these systems, is that correct?
Yeah. We have a pretty small team, and so I'm the principal security engineer on the team.
And so being on a small team, like what tools and techniques do you find? And I think a lot of people are in this situation where it's a small security team. They're trying to secure a large organization or an organization that has a lot of moving parts. And like what tools and techniques are effective for you and your team?
Well, we rely pretty heavily on Splunk. We just installed it actually a little while ago, but that's our SIEM. And I'm happy to say we're using Tenable products, actually.
Nice. Everything comes full circle, right?
Yeah, exactly. When I was working for the government, I was actually really happy because that was the space I came out of, and they had just switched to Tenable right at the time that I started there, and so I could really leverage that. But those I would say are the big two. I don't want to get in too much to what we use because we do work with the government. So it's like I could tell you, but I'd have to kill you.
Yeah. And so, do you attend any of the security conferences, of the hundreds of security conferences?
Not often enough, honestly. It comes down to money. There's an Amazon conference that I'm going to be attending in May, or maybe it's June. I think it's June. So I'm going to that because we do a lot of stuff in the cloud. But I'd love it if I could work for someone who would actually send me to Black Hat because, I'm coming out of raising 3 kids. My 2 older children are grown, but my youngest is still a teenager. And honestly, that's where my money goes.
So how has the transition to the cloud been from a security perspective?
Pretty hellish. Just because there's not a lot of knowledge.
Yeah.
I really like the cloud. I'm so old, I guess I would say, that I kind of distrust the idea. I don't want to do anything too quickly, and I'm glad that that's not happening. At the same time, I don't want to be a Luddite. So,
yeah, it was interesting. I was talking with some folks about the transition to cloud, and people that have been in the industry for a while, I think, still have this attitude like, oh, like all these new containers and cloud thing, like it's just a fad. I'm kind of the opinion that it's definitely not a fad. I don't know what your take on that is, Mimi.
No, I mean, when everybody first started talking about the cloud, I was sort of like, it's the internet, guys. But I understand why they say cloud instead of internet. I understand that they're using it for a different purpose, and so they needed a new name. And so at first, I was like, it's going to swing back. People are going to go back to, the whole everything needs to be inside. And they still may. But I've come to the conclusion, and this was, a couple of years ago, that cloud's here to stay. And the sooner people learn to be comfortable with securing systems in the cloud, the happier they're going to be. I have to confess, I'm not an expert at it yet. I took one class where the guy had never dealt with security people before. So we all completely disrailed the class. I was trying to stay quiet, but there were all these guys who were like, well, what about this? And the guy didn't know. He wasn't a security person. So that was frustrating. I'm hoping eventually just to get the knowledge from taking a boot camp for the certification, the ISC certification for the cloud, just so I can get some more knowledge. Because aside from reading books, which, I don't have as much time to do as I'd like, unless I'm in a class to do that. I just don't have a lot of time to just sit there and pore over a book. So I'm really hoping that maybe I can get my boss to agree that I should take the certification boot camp.
Yeah, I would say a good recommendation for that would be, at least in my case, I have the same situation. I have a third underway. I'm always busy. Job consumes like 10 hours of my day. So one of the things that has really helped me has been video training. So there's IT Pro TV, there's Pluralsight, there's CBT Nuggets, there's Lynda.com.
Cyber.
And one of the Cyber. So one of the advantages is that sometimes I'm working, I can go into those trainings and just go specifically to the video for what I need to learn that day for the specific task that I'm doing. I can watch somebody do it, and that's very helpful because I'm kind of like a very visual person, and I can have the video on the side and just have it run. I can do what I'm doing. And also when it comes to cloud, one of the things I have learned after dealing with Azure, AWS, Google, is that at the end of the day, the security principles remain the same. You need to track assets.
Yeah. That's actually, that's a really good comment, Carlos. I literally, this is so topical for me because I'm doing a cloud security assessment this week, and you're absolutely dead on target. The same principles apply. It's just in a different place with different tool set.
Yep, and also knowing how to script becomes so much bigger in a cloud system. Because with cloud, stuff moves a lot faster. So you have to automate a lot. So all of a sudden they come to you, hey, I want to deploy all of these machines. Well, you won't go one by one and create each one of the instances. You're going to have scripts. And that's why when you go, let's say, to AWS, you go to Azure, all of them have the concept of runbooks or playbooks where you have to go in and you have to roll up your sleeves, write a bit of code on how do you want that infrastructure and let that code be the one that defines the infrastructure for you. And as I was saying before, the concepts are the same. You're dealing with assets. Well, before there were servers, routers, and printers. Now your assets are some routing devices, application instances, containers, and VMs. But they're still there. Then you need to know what you're running on each one of the assets. Well, I need to know the version of software of my applications that are running, what components, what libraries. With my VMs, they're just like a server. I need to know what software is running in them. Are they properly patched? Yes, no. My containers, the same. Hey, my master image, is it patched? is the master image and deployment. When I use Chef, Puppet, DSC, whatever to configure this, am I making it unsecure? So that means I need to do configuration management. Same thing in data center, same thing in cloud. Only thing is that cloud moves faster. That's why you need to automate so much.
Right, and that's actually been a problem I found where, I very often find when I'm joining a team, and it's happening this time too, they haven't had a lot of processes that are automated at all. So, for instance, I walked in and I said, why am I doing all this stuff by hand? Why am I doing my trainer this week pointed out that they don't call it CNA anymore, but they still do. When I'm doing CNA on systems, why am I doing all this manually? Why aren't I scripting, some of the stuff that's coming off our assets and that kind of thing? And so, but the great thing is that I'm going to have the freedom to say this needs to be done. I can do it, which is what's great about being in a very small and kind of more. Not agile in the sense that it's used now for the development, but agile in the sense of, boots on the ground, we're going to turn around fast and do something, sort of organization. So I'm happy about that, frustrated that they're not already in place, but happy that I'm going to be able to do a lot of that. So.
Yeah, one of the things I've observed in the market recently, I think, in the job market in technology, is I think that based on recent conversations we've had, and a lot of what I've been seeing is that you need programming skills. And, Carlos says scripting. I mean, that's programming, right? You need to understand the fundamentals of programming. We've always said it for security, right? You need to know some kind of programming and have a scripting language, but I think to be an IT administrator, systems administrator in really any capacity today, whether you're Active Directory, whether you're doing it in the cloud, or any of these orchestration products, deployment for all of these things, maintenance of all these things, now requires some level of programming knowledge. You don't have to be the world's best software engineer, but you have to understand the basics and fundamentals and be able to program, because like Carlos said, things are moving really fast now, and in order to maintain and manage all this stuff, you're going to need a programming background. Maybe not today, but certainly as we move forward in the future.
I agree with that completely. I actually started that way. It's funny, back in the 80s, when I was actually working as a secretary for the federal government, I started working with IBM C-List and TSO. And just because I was bored, you're bored when you're like doing typing and filing and crap like that. So I was like, well, teach me these systems to the programming people they had. And the next thing I knew, I was automating a lot of, our little secretarial processes. And it's like, since then, I could never get a job as a programmer, but I know a little bit about a whole lot of things. So I know a little PowerShell. I'm mandated to learn more and actually start automating some of our processes with PowerShell. But the fact that I already knew a little bit was kind of a good thing. So I completely agree with you.
Yeah, so that means that you're going to be in my class at DerbyCon?
Yeah. Carlos is teaching a PowerShell class at DerbyCon, so you should put in for that, Mimi.
That would be great, and that's in Kentucky, right? That's in Louisville.
Yes.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a consideration. Is that in around the Derby, or is it
right before?
That's right before Derby. So that's going to be Wednesday and Thursday. I think the 21, the 22nd, and then of September, and then the conference starts on Friday. Typically, what I do is I do a series of webcasts a month or two before, where I go through all of the basics of PowerShell and provide the students labs and videos and stuff. So that way, when they come to class, all of them are kind of like on the same book, on the same level.
Well, maybe that can be my birthday present this year, because that would be great timing for me.
You should absolutely do this, Mimi, because not only will you be going to an awesome class with Carlos, you will get to meet probably all of us, because I think pretty much all of us in the Security Weekly clan normally go to DerbyCon. So
that is correct.
Fantastic.
Great. I went to the con that's like right after that 1 year. I'm trying to think.
Oh, what is that one? I spoke at that one year with John.
I actually introduced Marcus Ranum at that con 1 year.
Oh, that's funny. Do you know Marcus? Did you work with Marcus early in your career? I know you said you were in a similar.
He had just left TIS when I joined, but I used to like read all his blogs. I mean, it's kind of funny because when I was introducing him at this con, whatever the hell they call it, it's their security month con, you know.
Yeah.
And it's like in the first week of October, and I actually confessed, and I think all these people thought I was a terrible person because I said, yeah, I'm a huge Marcus Ranum fangirl. I kind of e-stalked him down through the years, and finally I was like, he's at Tenable. I got to work there. And all these people were like, who is this woman?
She's scary.
But, you know, again, it's one of those wonderful things about being a woman. I'm going to make a note about DerbyCon. So
yeah, do it. We'd love to see you there. That would be fun.
I would love to go. I tried to go last year, but I was working for the government, and they didn't want to.
We were talking earlier about how essential programming skills are. And Mimi, you've mentioned several times that you're a woman, and women getting into our field. feel like some women feel like there are barriers coming into our field. I feel like in a general sense that we don't generally push engineering in the software sense early enough on in our education. What do you suggest we can do to get people at a younger age, and especially women, to be involved with our field?
I think part of the problem is that women, particularly little girls, aren't really so much different from boys. I mean, up to a certain age, you can't tell the difference, you know? And I'm just speaking physically. So, well, I mean, you know.
Other than the obvious differences,
but
right? Yeah.
You know what I mean.
I know what you're saying.
So the thing is that if people just, and I guess I'm going to get a little political here, but if we could get teachers to just stop differentiating between how they treat boys and how they treat girls, and encourage parents to do the same, maybe not so much how they treat their own children at home, but what they encourage their kids to do and not do. One of the stories I love to tell about my daughter is she's this tiny little thing. She's 5'0". She weighs 95 pounds. Okay. She, when she was a little girl in kindergarten, she was the smallest kid in the class. And one day this little boy came up to her and he pinched her behind. And the teacher was going to intervene. And the little boy thought, haha, you know, I'm this big man. And my daughter turned around and just said, women don't like that. You shouldn't do that to women. That is not how women like to be treated. And if you ever do that again, she had him backed up against the wall. And of course, a lot of this was my feminist training. Well, the thing is that kind of thing should never have been able to happen in a classroom. And in a classroom today, we're still seeing so much of, you know, teachers calling on the boys first, teachers pushing, you know, the boys towards math, but the girls towards, you know, something that's girlier. I can't even think maybe what, but, you know, drama or whatever. And where there are a lot of little boys who might want to take drama and a lot of little girls who might want to take, you know, shop or, you know, whatever they're offering. So I think there needs to be less gendered teaching. And right there, not even what they're teaching. You know, certainly they should be teaching coding at a very young language in the schools. But even if they're not doing that specific thing, you know, especially in schools that are like way out in the boonies or whatever, even if they're not doing that specific thing, if they're at least teaching girls to not think that they have to go in a certain direction just because they're girls.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And it's interesting having a lot of friends in the security industry and knowing many of them very well. The general sense that I get is regardless of the gender of their child, they don't push, you know, in either direction, but they make available to either gender all of the things that we know as security professionals. And I think a lot of that is what you're saying, Mimi, is the building aspect, right? It's not so much the arts, but engineering, software, or whatever is like a building thing. And you're like, boys do the building and play with blocks and girls do the artsy things. Like, no, there should not be those differentiations. And a lot of us in security today, I noticed they're like, son or daughter doesn't matter. We're teaching them how to build things. We're letting them build Raspberry Pis and teaching them software and all of these things. And I agree with you. I think that needs to extend not just from the parents, but into the schools as well.
Hey, can I interject real quick?
Yeah, please do, Jeff.
So one of the other things, and I would slightly disagree with Mimi on this, and that is, I'm not sure whether I may be taking your statement out of context, but I actually believe, having raised 2 children, one of each gender, that girls are so much more mature than boys at an earlier age, that if we didn't have gender bias in the teaching, we would see those girls who are interested actually excel in the information security and programming and computational sciences way sooner than we would see male children excel. And this is just sort of a biological fact of maturity and human growth. And so I think it sort of doubles down. It's almost twice as disappointing that we have such a bias away from females being able to excel in the industry.
Well, right. And that's the thing. It's like, I think that if you were to point girls at technical or building subjects very early on, they would excel. And to some extent, they would even push the boys out. But then the boys would catch up. I mean, girls are more mature at an earlier age, but that evens out eventually. And I think that
certainly.
Girls right now, that extra chance, I think that would, I'm sorry, by the way, you might be hearing some noise here. I tried to turn on the AC in my house and it wasn't working out. So I turned on I put the window up.
No worries.
I'm dripping sweat here. I'm like, anyway,
hold on. Along those lines, while we're on that topic, it's really hot in the studio. By the way, someone could crack a door as well. It's all of our glowing personalities. That's what it is.
That's what it is. We're such hot people.
So I think sort of implicitly I agreed with you, Mimi. I was just the maturity aspect that I wanted to put out there, because there's absolutely no doubt with my children, and I suspect we have children of similar ages, right around teen and 20, that the maturity level of my daughter is just stunningly ahead. I mean, even now to my son, and given the right environment from a teaching perspective, that would be an entirely different outcome, assuming that she was interested, right?
Yeah, well, that's the thing. I mean, I know that it never occurred to me until I was in my 20s that I could even pursue a technical type of profession. I mean, anything at all. And when I was 18 and I was doing, I mean, it was low level programming. It was, it was scripting and that kind of thing. It wasn't, Fortran or whatever, but which is, it was still heavily in use at that time. That's how old I am. But nobody was really encouraging me except for a couple of friends. But I mean, there was no, the establishment, teachers, even in college, whatever, that there was no encouragement. And I sometimes wonder that I'm where I am today, considering how little I was encouraged. So
it's interesting, and I think it's kind of a challenge or a mission for all the listeners of this and viewers of this show. That when for example, my son did 2 or 3 different programming workshops, essentially, courses, and it was all boys in his class. And I know that, like I said, the friends that we have in security, the gender doesn't matter. If their child is interested in that stuff or they give them the option to take that class, it doesn't matter the gender. I think we need to encourage outside of our circle to, if there is a class like that, or you have the opportunity to encourage your children, regardless of gender, to do those kind of things, that you do. And I think that as time goes on, that will really help. bridge the gap. So.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Yeah, I completely agree with that too, Paul. And I think this is actually a really, really good discussion. I think amongst the male population, there's probably a little bit of fear because of, if we encourage this, to be honest, those girls are way smarter and way more mature than we are at a young age. I'm fully aware and able to admit that, and it will definitely change the balance if we change our behaviors.
Oh, but it so needs changing, I'll tell you, because even now, I mean, you'll hear about something like I forget what his name is, but the CEO of Uber, referring to his company as Boober. And what happened to that female programmer, Susan Fowler there?
That was Uber's gotten into a lot of trouble, and that was just an abomination, and it's really sad.
But they're not an outlier, Paul.
Yeah, no, you're right.
So, and I'm not trying to get too heavily feminist, political, whatever, but it's part of my life every day. So.
Yeah, and I think, encouraging diversity at all levels is really important. I'll go out on a limb somewhat and say I think it's really important to our field as well, because as security professionals, and not that we're all that different from a lot of other fields, but our field is in that category where we have a lot of different challenges, we have a lot of different problems to solve, and those problems change very rapidly over time and very quickly. As we were just talking about, the whole cloud thing, for example, and containerization, and having as much diversity, people of different backgrounds, people of all different types working together to solve those problems is of great benefit, right, to pushing the needle forward on what we're trying to accomplish in our field, and that's security, right? So I think it's really important to encourage diversity of all kinds in our field.
Indeed. This is probably the least technical interview you've had in a while.
No, that's fine. It certainly doesn't have to be technical.
It's absolutely been a great discussion.
Yeah, we're all about having good conversations. More questions, topics that you want to cover? Anyone? Carlos, Joff, Mimi? We're at a crossroads here, so you have the liberty to direct wherever we want to go.
Well, Mimi, just moving away from sort of the political spectrum for a minute. In your current gig, what are the biggest technical challenges that you're facing that you can talk about, and how are you addressing those in general?
I'd say probably keeping up with everything. I mean, obviously, security threats, the security atmosphere is changing constantly. And for instance, I'm in a class this week. I'm trying to get my ISSAP certification purely because I would like to make some more money. Mm-hmm. And I've
at least you're honest. No, that's good. There's nothing wrong with that.
Right?
Yeah, fair comment, right?
Yeah. I want to get the money for it. So I'm taking that class. It's a global knowledge class, and I'm finding I'm not learning anything, which is good. I didn't want to learn anything new, but at the same time, I also realized that a lot of the stuff that ISC squared teaches or tests on is 10-year-old technology. And because I was also spending a good deal of the last 10 years working for the federal government, they don't move very fast. They were still, for instance, on Vista in 2010. The DoD was specifically using Vista. Now, I don't know what all the government agencies were doing, but I was working with the military, specifically first DoD and then Coast Guard. And they're on the DoD network, so it's as if you were working with DoD. And when I went back and started working with the Coast Guard, they once more had just upgraded. They skipped XP. I guess they went right on to 7. And, yay for them, but Windows 7, holy cow, what were they thinking? The version of Tenable, of Security Center they were using was version 4, and version 5 had come out a couple of years before. It's just the technology out there tends to be so old, but to make it worse, that's what I had to work on. And so no matter how much I tried to keep up with what's out there, there's only 24 hours in a day. When you're chronically ill, you spend a good deal of that sleeping. So I was finding that I was way behind in the field, and I didn't like that. So, now I'm kind of running to catch up, and I'm enjoying it. I'm kind of a sponge. But at the same time, there's stuff I find that's out there, and I think any security professional has the same problem to some extent. There's always something new. There's always something difficult that you have to learn or to absorb.
I would say only the winners or the good ones have that problem.
Yeah,
Well,
I was going
Great point,
about
Carlos.
to say almost the same thing. Very well said, Carlos.
Yeah.
The people that recognize the problem, that understand they need to keep running to catch up, are the ones that are doing it right. In my opinion, those are the ones that understand that to be able to deliver a good service to their customers means to keep running, basically.
Yeah. In fact, a good example, recently I was hired by the Marine Corps to do some training for some of their units. And I remember when I was at class, some of the young people were not putting too much attention to class somewhere. But when I look at the gunnery sergeants, those guys were on it, absorbing it. Carlos, do you have extra material? Then at the next day, these guys were coming in. Okay, I read what you gave me last night. Look at this example, what I'm working on. And these are the old guys. That's
impressive.
They were older than me, and the gunnies were coming in with scripts that I was going like, damn, that's never thought of the problem that way. And it's that attitude, having that attitude of wanting more, wanting to perfect, wanting to bring your skills to a good level. And as you say, we get busy. In my case, it is I don't read that much. Most of the stuff that I do is actually audiobooks. And every morning when I go to the gym and I go into the elliptical, I put in the headsets, choose the book of that day, hit play, and I've been able just to go consume 80 hours of audiobooks in 1 month. Typically, just going through one audiobook after another and have my own collection. Other times what I'll do is have the Pluralsight app, and I'll download an entire class. And I know that I need to learn something about C. I haven't touched C in almost 10 years. So I had to download the entire fundamentals of C code, C programming. And right now, this last week, I've been putting it on the elliptical. And while I'm doing it at the elliptical, I'm watching the video there. So we have to also reinvent how we learn stuff.
Carlos,
Carlos.
I think that is such a true statement. It's almost like in this industry, you are constantly reinventing yourself. It's not, if you stay static, you will not be in this industry for long.
That's
Mimi, and my question for you, Mimi, is what are some of the things that you're doing to keep current with what's happening in security, in learning security today?
Well, I end up reading a lot online. I am also watching videos to the extent I can. One of the things that really kind of I'd like to change about the structure of my job is just that every time I seem to start watching something, like when Carlos was talking before about, watching videos and stuff to learn, it's like I do attempt to do that, and then I'll have walk-ups, and people who don't understand that having the headphones in my ears means I can't actually hear them. I have to take the headphones out and stop what I'm doing. That's something I'll never understand, by the way. Why somebody doesn't get that the fact you have headphones on means you can't understand them.
Yeah, it's kind of like the on-air thing on the radio station, right? Like when you have headphones on.
Mimi, that maybe what you need to do is get an on-air sign and just like post it on your desk or cubicle or whatever works, and maybe people will get it.
You know what's interesting though? Those signs are actually really expensive, so it's a nice project to like get a Raspberry Pi or an Arduino and like make one yourself.
I actually had a friend, a coworker, an ex-coworker, that he actually had this wooden tokens made, and they had 5 minutes, and he only had a short amount of them, and he would give them out to the other coworkers, and he would say, if you see me on my desk working and you want to interrupt me, you have to give me one of this. If you don't have it, you have to wait until lunchtime or reschedule a meeting. So he started kind of like incentivizing them and trying to change the culture himself of not interrupting him when he was working on stuff, and trying to kind of, you would say, re-educate them, his coworkers, on how to behave. And he actually had those tokens. And if you ran out of tokens that week, you couldn't interrupt him.
I would love to do something like that, but unfortunately, we're kind of oriented in a different direction. That if somebody walks up to our desk, they're our first priority until they feel they're satisfied. Ooh, so we're trying to get them not to walk up and to create tickets instead, but that's not happening. So
yeah,
anyway,
it depends. It depends on your situation. My team here at Security Weekly don't think you can't. They always can interrupt me at any time. That's totally fine and acceptable, because they're my team, and many of them have just joined the team as well. So that's even more reason that you're absolutely able to interrupt me. However, in different scenarios that I've been in my career, certainly as well. Maybe to speak to your experience. When I was just getting into the field, I was instructed, like, don't not ask questions, but don't spend an entire day wasting your time on a problem that you could have gone and asked someone. Like, spend a reasonable amount of time. Like 30 minutes was like the rule. And like, if you went up to someone and asked a question, you haven't shown that you spent that 30 minutes trying to figure the problem out, like, you were in trouble, right? But if you had said, hey, look, I've spent like the past half an hour or even an hour like trying to figure this out and I got stuck, can you help me get unstuck? Then that was acceptable, so that you don't spend 3 or 4 or 5 hours on something that someone could have, provided you guidance with and gotten you the answer. So there's certainly a balance.
Yeah, and one tip, Mimi, that I had to apply to myself. Typically, I do this podcast. I help with Init6, which is a non-for-profit organization here in Puerto Rico, to teach other hackers. I run B-Sides Puerto Rico. I have my day job, and I've always had to kind of look at my planner and look at, I use OmniFocus to do my GTD of getting things done and doing my daily reviews of my stuff. And one of the things I had to learn is many times I'm going to have to wake up at 5 a.m., 6 a.m., because that's the only time I found that the kids are still sleeping for 1 more hour. My wife
that's for a while, Carlos, until your baby's born, and then that changes.
Yeah? Oh, yeah, I know.
you know, for about a year. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's the only time I look at my calendar, I look at everything, and I at least try to set up 1 hour a day where I can sit down, read something. And the other thing is something that I've been kind of enforcing in my classes is teaching students to keep a wiki. Just Media Wiki, X Wiki, whatever.
That's a good
OneNote, and keep a journal. Or keep your, I call them build a playbook. You build a playbook, and I give them an example, and bring over some persistent technique where I explain the different technique. Then I explain, and then I have another section of the technique being done in Metasploit, another in Cobalt Strike, then another in VBScript, and another in Python with the same technique, and apply it and just explore that technique, document everything, and that process of documenting something you just learn kind of like ingrains it in. And at the same time, it gives something to the entire team that can be shared, and it's kind of like a shared knowledge among all of them.
Yeah, I think
Go ahead, Mimi. Go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I actually do something like that in Evernote, which is my note taker of choice. I've got I actually pay for their highest level of access just so I can have like 6,000 notes. And I'm constantly taking notes on whatever I'm reading or listening to or doing. And I found it's really been helpful. First of all, because I have a horrible memory, but second of all, just because I can go back and look at the notes later and say, okay, what was I thinking here? And, how am I going to apply this to the problem I'm having now?
I've been using Google Keep for some of that too. I kind of like that.
Google Keep's good. And the other thing for information security professionals that I think is incredibly useful, I know Carlos does this, is not only wikiing stuff or Evernote stuff. Just go ahead and start doing blogs. Blogs are a way to sort of dump your memory into a semi-permanent form. I mean, I've actually been known now to go back to prior blog posts to say, what was I thinking then? And it's still applicable. So that's also a very, very good way to do things.
I haven't blogged in like almost 4 years now, and I need to get back into it.
Yeah, Mimi, you were writing. You've done some writing in your career, correct?
Yeah. Well, I was a guest blogger for a while with Crane's Cleveland Business and Great Lakes Computer. Both had me guest blogging. And then I also had my own blog that I would write in, and I was doing it more. I found when I was writing for professional publications, I would actually use my own blog more. But then that changed somewhere around the time that I moved back to DC. I stopped writing for both those publications, and I just found that I didn't have time to write in my blog as much, which is sad, because if there's something I like to do, it's write. Writing and presenting are probably my favorite things to do. I like making people understand things, if you will. So
Mimi, you just sort of hit upon the key. If you're going to do blogging, presenting, you need the time and the space to be able to do it right. Yeah. If you don't have that time to sequence your thoughts and to get things written down in such a fashion that you're satisfied with them, it's frankly not worth doing, right?
Yeah.
And one recommendation there that I gave a friend of my wife. My wife is very active in her religion, and she has friends that are also very active, and they wanted to get into blogging, but again, they couldn't find the time. And one of the things I told one of them is, why don't you make your blog like so-and-so's notes, or so-and-so's coffee with God? And what they do is that they write very short, concise messages on the stuff that they have discussed that day in their classes or their meetings. And it is just simple notes that they can just, as they're talking with everybody and they're taking their notes during the meetings, they can go and take those notes and just put a small blurb. And that's something they can do on a daily basis, because the most important thing with blogging that I found is building that habit of writing.
Yes.
I have 4 started blog posts that I haven't finished. And at least I try to go once a week, go and write a bit more on each one of them. At least every Wednesday during the morning. That is my the day that I don't go to the gym is the day that I rest. But I still wake up at 4 a.m., 4:30 a.m., and I go downstairs and at least I write a couple of paragraphs on each one of them. So when I can then schedule those for to go in one a week or something like that. But I try to build a habit of every Wednesday. I still wake up very early. I go downstairs. I start writing at least a paragraph.
Well, and what's interesting though is along these lines, we talked about having meetings, and we also talked about it being very difficult to keep up with the technology in our field and constantly learning. And one of the things I've done with our team here and a lot of other security companies, I find that my friends are either running or participating in, are doing the same thing, and that's the daily 15-minute scrum, as they call it. And we have a scrum 4 days a week here at Security Weekly, but it's a very similar thing to what everyone's talking about in terms of writing and blogging and taking notes as well. It's not having that like one hour meeting, but breaking that up into 15-minute chunks, and as well as breaking up your writing up into that those chunks as well, I think is really important.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea, because I'm writing constantly. It's just not all for publication, and probably I could transform some of that. Honestly, I'm going to take one of your people, Paul, had sent me a long list of questions. And I actually sat down and wrote out the answers to a good many of them, because
nice.
I tend to forget words. Like I'll say the thing, the noun, the whatever, and
I'm right there
so
with
I was
you.
like, well, if I write down the answers to all these questions that they might ask me, then I won't forget what the words were.
But now you have that to use in other content, and that's actually, those are questions that I developed over probably 6 or 8 months, right? And it's just general topics that we use in various different forms, sometimes in our mini interviews at conferences, or sometimes in our interviews on the show, or sometimes as a topic for another show. So it was like my way of kind of brainstorming and collecting high-level questions and topics for everyone. So I hope it's useful for you.
It is. Can I actually ask you guys something?
Sure.
There was, and I don't want to pick on this guy. I actually kind of hope that he doesn't know that I'm on this interview and that he doesn't listen, because I don't want to embarrass him. But I was talking to somebody the other day, and we were talking about certifications because my organization is very into getting everybody training and certified in whatever they want to be certified in. And of course, as I mentioned, I'm taking the ISSAP class right now. I'm going to take that test as soon as I can, and then, as I say, I hope I'll be worth more. But what he said to me, and this is a guy who's been working in our department for a year, and he said to me, "Well, I'm going to take this certification and that certification and that certificate." You know, like he named about 4 or 5 different certifications, and he said, "In 5 years, I'm going to be the cybersecurity SME." And I said, "Really?"
Really?
You know, I'm
That's
in my
ambitious.
21st year now, and I've never considered. I mean, if somebody said, "Are you a SME in cybersecurity?" If they said that, they'd probably be somebody who works for the government. So I'd say yes. But if somebody, like if one of you guys were to say to me, "Mimi, do you consider yourself an information security expert?" I would say, "Dear God, no. I'm going to be learning until the day I die." And so I laughed, and I was like, in 5 years from when you start, you want to be an absolute expert on security. That's what you're telling me.
Yeah. Yeah. So,
You're
but
taking
my
your certs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you got to separate certification from training, and my take on certification has always been that early on in your career, I think, to kind of get your foot in the door, and if it helps you as a person focus, certainly I fall in that category. When I did my early on SANS certifications and training, it helped me focus. It helped me have some goals, right? Like I want to learn more about TCP/IP and intrusion detection, so therefore I'm going to take this training and get that certification because it's going to help me focus. And I think that's totally fine. And I think some organizations and many look for a certification, and that's fine, and it's one measure. I think early on in your career, it can be really helpful, whether you got a degree in it or whether you're working in the field or in IT in general and you want to specialize in security. You know, getting a certification, going through a training program, and then getting a certification is a good thing. I think after early on in your career, it's really debatable, like how much that helps you become more of an expert. I think after the initial stages, it's more experience, and not work experience, but experience in whatever you're doing in security. And that can be most certainly even better a research project that you're taking on by yourself. That can be an open source project. That can be one you're helping out with, or one that you're like, hey, I wrote this tool or whatever, like, and that was my research project. I think very quickly from certification, it should transform into experience, and not work experience, but your in general experience about what you want to do in the field and things that you've taken initiative in. And that's the whole point. I think when I look at certification, if you've got a couple of certifications and then you went on to do like your own kind of things, to me that shows, hey, you had initiative to have the certification in the first place, and then went on to have more initiative into like doing your own things. And it helps, certification and training early on helps form that base for you to go on and do other things. And that's kind of my take on it.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, Paul.
Yeah, no, I agree with you too. I think my issue is more the idea that somebody would think, okay, well, I'm going to be an expert because I have 5 certs. And I'm like, okay, 5 certs are great, and I don't have 5.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
That reminds me of the Dilbert comic of the guy certified, and he has the
Right.
big sign like Superman, but with a C. I'm certified, and Well, he goes, but that didn't fix the problem. But that's the only thing they taught us in the class.
Yeah,
Exactly.
Well, yeah, I mean that idea that Mimi was talking about, it's not unfounded. I mean, there are some professions where that's absolutely true. They're static professions. You learn the set of knowledge, and you have the quote unquote mastery. It's just not true of the information security profession because it is continually shifting and changing. And as Paul said, the certifications give you a base set of knowledge, which you then are required to build upon and continue advancing and learning and maturing in your knowledge, and you never stop, which is fundamentally different than some professions out there that absolutely do have this sort of mastery of knowledge.
And I look at if I were to hire someone and I want them to know Linux, and if they just had certifications, I'm like, yeah, okay, that's one thing. Like, you show you have the fundamentals. However, if you show not just experience, but you're like, hey, I got my certification in Linux, but then, I wrote this blog about Linux security stuff, and then I also did helped out this open source project, or in other words, after I got my certification, I applied my foundation to something else. And that doesn't have to be work experience. Like, I don't want to make people think like, oh, I need experience and I can't get a job, so I don't have the experience. Like, no, if you show that you have the initiative to further beyond your certification, that makes you as an individual stand out to me as someone I want to hire. It also, I think, strengthens your certification in your portfolio and shows that you have initiative, that you got the fundamentals and then built on them. And you have to show, for me, that second step, that you wanted to build on those fundamentals. Just saying that you have, to your point, Mimi, like a bunch of certifications, that's just like one step in the journey, right? Like, I got a Linux certification, but to be honest, like, the way I got some of my jobs early in my career, and they were like, hey, do you know NFS? I'm like, yeah, I took it upon myself to set that up in my house because I'm a nerd and I had nothing better to do at the time, and I was interested in it. And yeah, I haven't run it at my house, and here's a picture of my servers at home. And I think that combination of the two is really important, but very important to say that you don't need to say, well, I got a certification, I got a job. Like, no, get a certification and show some initiative. And to me, and I hope to all the employers out there, right, like, make that mean more when you're hiring people than just a certification or just experience in and of itself.
Right.
As a manager, I actually do that. I've told recruiting, make sure that when I get the resume of the candidates that you're sending to me, make sure that they include their GitHub, their blog.
Right.
Because or their Bitbucket or their GitLab. But I want to see what they're doing, what if they're passionate enough, yes or no. And one of the questions at the end of the initial interview, I'm going to ask, hey, so do you have a home lab? Yes, no. What are the latest technical books you've read and you found interesting? And what are your hobbies? And I'll ask those kind of questions because they tell me a lot about the personality of that person and how willing he is to learn himself or have that motivation, like, I want to keep learning.
Right.
And because sadly, I'm not trying to be Jack Daniel and saying that kids these days or millennials or anything that. But a lot of kids nowadays are pain adverse. Like, I'm not willing to have a little discomfort to learn something, or I'm not doing this if I'm at least not getting a participation ribbon or medal.
Yeah. You have to show, right? When you have to show effort, right? And it almost doesn't matter to me, like, what that effort is. Like, if, for example, go back to the Linux example, like, yeah, you got a Linux certification or something, but you're like, I built a Raspberry Pi or some Linux device, and I got Kodi on it, and I'm using it for, like, entertainment systems in my home, which I love to experiment with in my own house. I'm like, dude, that's awesome. Like, I don't care what it is, right? Like, Mark, one of our employees here, I bought everyone a Raspberry Pi, and he's like, well, I set up, like, a webcam at my house to, like, because someone tried to break into my car. So I'm like, that's awesome. Like, it doesn't matter what the use case is. The fact that you're using your skills for whatever in that area is just awesome. So
yeah, I mean, to show initiative, to show completion of something, to actually, leverage the skills you got. Yeah, absolutely. And Carlos, I love what you do. as a manager, I know that I would never have been able to work for you.
Yeah. Oh, that's not
No,
true.
I've seen your code. You have good code. Don't worry.
Yeah, love you, man.
It's all right, Code. Love you, Jeff. So, Mimi, are you ready to play 5 questions with Security Weekly?
I am actually very ready because I knew you were going to ask me these, so I thought about them in advance.
It's not so much a secret. So, 3 words to describe yourself.
Short, cute, and loud.
If you were a serial killer, what would be your weapon of choice?
My mind.
If you wrote a book about yourself, what would the title be?
Why is it Monday again?
In the popular game of Ask Grabby Grabby, do you prefer to go first or second?
Always first, but I'll go second if I get a chance, too.
Choose 2 celebrities to be your parents.
Robert Heinlein and Helen Mirren. I think they cancel each other out a little bit.
Very nice. Very nice. That's awesome. I like that you were prepared for that, too. That was awesome.
That was the fastest I've ever seen.
That was great. That was great.
You know that looking through the photos in my laptop, I actually saw a picture of Mimi on my first Tenable Christmas party.
Oh, yeah. Wow, that was like 50 pounds ago.
Was that? Hold on. Was that on a boat? Was it?
Yep.
That was the boat.
It was a boat.
I'm on the boat. Yes.
Yep.
Oh, that's fabulous.
We talked on the boat.
We did. We talked on the boat.
I was probably drunk and smoking a cigar in the back of the boat.
I was tremendously drunk. I was so drunk that I hit on the cute little marketing. She was the head of marketing at the time, Dolly.
Yes, Dolly. Dolly's awesome.
I hit on her.
I think you were
fabulous.
dancing. The picture I have, you were dancing on the dance floor with her. She was blonde, right?
Yes, Dolly was blonde. Yeah, Dolly is blonde. I think still blonde to this day, and Dolly's awesome.
Yeah.
As is her husband, Dave. Yeah, they're great people.
Yeah, I really missed that whole crowd. I still talk about Tenable constantly as probably one of my favorite places to work, and it's pretty funny because I was there for less than a year. But I'll tell you, if they reached out their hand, like Sauron or whatever, and said, come be my slave, I would completely do it. So.
Oh my goodness!
I am still friends with a lot of people at Tenable and who are at Tenable as well. So it's very, very awesome people to be in touch with. In fact, one of them was supposed to call me and didn't. So hopefully I'll talk with him tomorrow. But fantastic community around Tenable. So Mimi, thank you very much for appearing on Paul's Security Weekly. With that, we're going to take a short break. Come back and talk about staying secure at hacker conferences. So stay tuned. Don't go anywhere. The SANS Institute, the most trusted source for computer security certification training and research. Visit SANS.org to explore their full curriculum and latest training offerings. Gain control of cyber risk with Tenable.io, the first vulnerability management platform built for today's elastic assets like cloud, containers, and web apps. Discover a fresh, asset-based approach that prioritizes vulnerabilities while seamlessly integrating into your environment. And improve ROI with the first elastic licensing approach based on assets, not IP addresses. Tenable.io delivers the data and context you need to secure your elastic attack surface. Start your free Tenable.io trial today by visiting Tenable.io. NetSparker, the developers of desktop and cloud-based web application security scanners that enable you to automatically identify vulnerabilities in your web applications and web services. NetSparker scanners employ a unique and dead-accurate vulnerability scanning engine that automatically verifies vulnerabilities with their proof of concept. For more information, visit them on the web at netsparker.com or email at contact@netsparker.com. Welcome back, everyone, to Paul Security Weekly. This is our technical segment about staying secure at hacker conferences. First, a quick announcement. ITPro.tv's courses now include ITIL Managing the Lifecycle and Microsoft Hello for Business. Premium annual memberships to ITPro.tv include all video content, as well as access to virtual labs and Q&A forums. Now, pay attention, because this is a limited time offer, as I learned today, actually. You'd normally pay $85.70 a month or $857 per year for all of this access to all this awesome stuff. But we've got a special offer. For a limited time, get 50% off a monthly membership for the lifetime of your active subscription. And the news here is it could be ending soon-ish. So make sure you take advantage of that. itpro.tv/Security Weekly. The discount code is SS50. Take advantage of that now, because as the advertisement says, it's a limited time only. So make sure you go do that. Alrighty. I want to start first with a story. Have any of you guys ever had your laptop stolen?
Yep, definitely.
Carlos, no? Oh, Carlos, you're muted there. Carlos, you there? Oh, there you are.
Am I still? No, I have not.
Okay. So, Joff, you have, right? Fortunately, I have.
Yeah, I have.
I have not. I have had my phone stolen twice. Well, I think it was stolen twice. I actually lost it and then couldn't recover it once. I was in a parking lot of a sushi place. The other time, I was running into the event center in Providence, and it got lost. So I have lost my phone twice. It's an awful feeling, right, when you lose a piece of your own personal technology. And I won't say anyone's name here because it's really not relevant. But there are people that you would probably recognize in computer security that I happen to be friends with. That one of them was telling me a story. And they were at a conference outside of the U.S., and they were taken to the conference venue, and the conference venue said, hey, we have the secure room. You can leave your bags with your laptops in them. You know, leave all of your stuff here in this room. This is your speaker room. You're going to be hanging out for the day. You know, hey, leave your stuff here so you're more comfortable. And then we're going to take you to the vendor area, and we're going to introduce you to some of the vendors, and then take you back. And all of that, like, you know, vendor showboating took about 45 minutes. Like, it wasn't that long. And they brought them back into the room. And the room had an armed guard posted in front of the room where all of their stuff was, so that people felt safe. And my friend says, well, my laptop, I got back and I couldn't find my laptop. So he's like, I must have left the laptop in the safe at my room, which we'll get to, and went to his room and was like, it's not there, and was walking back and got a text from his other friend who had his bag in his room and said, hey, did you take my laptop? Because it's not in my bag. And, like, did you take with it, like, to mess with me? Because that's totally something, like, we would do, right? Like, Joff or Carlos, like, we'd be at a conference and, like joking around. We'd take each other's laptop to just see the panic that would ensue for a while and, like, then give it back, right? And he's like, no, I didn't. And it turns out that the guard was in on the whole thing, let some people in there. Now, there was, like, a dozen people, let's say, who had their stuff inside the room. And the two people that had Apple Mac computers, you know, MacBook Pros or whatever, were the only two people that lost their stuff. And, you know, outside of the U.S., I think Carlos can somewhat attest to this, right? Like, getting Apple products outside of the U.S. can sometimes be very problematic. So they're a hot commodity, so they probably fetched a much higher value. So to limit their time and maximize their profit, they just took the 2 Macs that were available to them at the time and got out really fast. And that is like a story that you want to hear told about someone that's not you, right? When you go to hacker conferences, it's really bad. Now, both being security professionals, both the hard drives were encrypted and all that stuff, so it wasn't so much about access to the data. It's the fact that it sucks, dude, to lose your laptop. Had they not encrypted the hard drive like we covered in the previous segment, it could have been worse. Most of the time, I mean, depending on the situation, a lot of times, they're just after the value probably in this situation of your particular device. So when we talk about staying secure at a hacker conference, any conference, not just a hacker conference, anytime you travel, it's very important to protect your stuff. So that's a really good story, like I said, that you want to be told about someone who's not you. And Ed Scotus is actually one of those people that anytime you see Ed, like he always has his laptop on him. And to a point where you're like, really? But then you hear that story about my friends, and you're like, no, like Ed's got it right. Like you should always have your laptop like on you.
Never put it in a backpack and just keep it on your body.
Right.
It's I've had that experience. It's a terrible, terrible feeling. Naturally, you take the appropriate defensive mechanisms, which everybody should take now, and make sure you have full disk encryption on, enabled on your laptop. But it's still possible to lose it, and it's a terrible, terrible feeling when that happens. But it does happen.
Absolutely. So number 11 on our list. My advice is to never plug your device, phone or I guess not a laptop, more so a phone, into those public charging stations. And I actually, in this case, I always remember like Dave Kennedy going to the news and talking about this particular subject, and he did a great job in talking about it. We've covered articles on the show, and every time I pass by any kind of public charging station, like I just kind of cringe, right? Because I still think today it's a very real possibility that whatever that charging station is could be basically not Trojaned, I guess, but have some nefarious technology in there that is going to read from your device. There was a TV show where they did this too. I don't remember which one it was. It was a really bad TV show that had an example of that. Go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, well, just for clarification, you're speaking of a public charging station that requires you to plug in with USB. Correct?
Correct.
Yeah.
Are there other types?
You can always plug into just a regular old power outlet, and that's, much less risk, right?
But, no, you're right. A USB charging station. Yes, you're right, Jeff. Correct.
Right. I mean, and the just to sort of spell it out for people, the issue is it's not just about charging on your system. There are, another 2 connectors there that transmit data. And so if you plug in to this unknown USB port, there's every chance that data can be transmitted across those other 2 connections.
Here's my suggestion. And actually, one of the conferences that we went to this year, I realized I left my battery charging pack at home. And battery packs for your tablets and smartphones are a lot more ubiquitous than they were 10 years ago or whatever, right? Like you can get these, and you can buy them in the convenience store now, right? And have for some time, right? I carried now 2 with me because I think that my new Chromebook, while it won't charge off of it, I think it'll maintain power. I haven't fully tested it, but it'll maintain power on my Chromebook. It'll certainly, the 2 that I carry, probably charge my phone, which is a Google Pixel, not the XL, but the smaller one, pretty much twice off of one of these battery packs. And that's my recommendation when you're traveling. They're not that expensive. You can get them in all different sizes and styles. I carry like 2 medium-sized ones in my bag at all times, so that if I'm without an outlet, like Joff was saying before, I always have some way to charge my device. So that's kind of the second piece there. Is that one there, Carlos? Is that when you travel? You travel with these, right? Most of us do now.
Yeah. I travel with
do
a
too.
16,000 milliamp battery pack. This will charge an iPad full and my iPhone twice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I tend to.
I'm the same way. I always travel with a battery pack.
Yep.
And mostly, actually, I started doing it because of longer flights.
Yes.
And you get on a flight, and the first thing you do when you get to a destination, as a traveling consultant, is you pull up your GPS software, and you're expecting your smartphone to be working, and so that battery pack becomes invaluable to keep the charge on your phone when you get to destination. So that's the reason I started doing it.
Absolutely. Yeah, and sometimes I carry a smaller one too with me, so that if while I'm at the conference I need to charge my phone, like while it's in my pocket, I can just put the battery pack in my pocket with a cable and charge it while I'm at the conference. Because when you're at a conference, I tend to find that your signal strength is really low, which causes more strain on your battery trying to get a signal. So your battery life is going to be worse at a conference than it is in your office or your home. And then you're going to be like, oh, I need to plug in somewhere. So traveling with a battery pack certainly is awesome.
I have been known in high density areas to just go ahead and switch my phone into airplane mode for a while.
Yeah.
Turn off the radios and just save battery.
There you go.
Because they're fighting for signal all the time, and there's a lot of contention. So
never ever go to a URL. This is number 12 that someone tells you to go to, or sends you in a message, or has in a 3D barcode anywhere at the conference. There was one year at DEF CON where just as a social engineering experiment, like people just put up like random 3D barcodes for people to scan, and like they'd put an image of Goatsy on your phone or something like that. But that could be something nefarious.
My favorite one was in one of the DerbyCons. Samsung announced a bug that would actually almost brick your phone. And I remember somebody was smart-ass enough to kind of print out the QR code to the link with the exploit and started taping it to the different walls all around DerbyCon.
Jeez.
Hoping for people to scan the QR code. And if sadly you were one of the guys that actually had one of those printable Samsung phones, you were in for a bad day.
Yeah. iOS has vulnerabilities like that as well. I don't know if it's a link, but it was an SMS kind of thing. So yeah, don't ever do that.
Don't scan QR codes.
Yes,
really
exactly.
Like a default rule.
Number 13, don't ever leave your badge unattended at the conference. And I mean, this varies per conference, but your badge is the access into the conference, obviously. And they're a hot commodity at a conference. And a lot of times at some of these conferences, they're like a piece of electronics and not very easily replaceable, and it can lead to a bad day. So, and if at the various conferences, like your badge could have different levels on it. Like when you get to the larger conferences, like Black Hat, for example, I'll use Black Hat as an example. There are different levels. So the press badge can get you access to the press room, and it can get you access to the conference area during normal conference times. It doesn't get you access to the talks. A regular conference badge gets you access to the vendor area during approved times and all of the talks, but not the press area. Now, a vendor badge, for those of you that may have not worked for a vendor in the past, right? If you've got vendor on your badge, that gets you access to the vendor area at all times. It doesn't, like a setup times and all that stuff, where the vendor booth space is unattended. And so they're providing some level of security by doing that so that attendees can't go into the vendor area when you're not at your booth and like steal stuff, which we've talked about already in these scenarios. So protecting your badge not only protects you, but protects other people at the conference as well. So it's a twofold kind of thing. So never, ever like leave your badge anywhere where someone can take it. I don't know if you guys have commentary on that, or I've never lost a badge that I can think of.
I keep it firmly around my neck.
Yep.
Of course, there are friends of mine, notably people right here on this podcast right now, who are apt to jump on me physically and try to remove it. I agree with that overall statement.
Absolutely. This number 14 is really specific to mostly DEF CON, right? And other conferences too. But when I'm at DEF CON, I don't use the ATM. Right? Like, that's just a generally bad idea.
Yes. I totally agree with that.
Yeah. I still remember DEF CON 17 when we were at the Riviera, and all of a sudden there was one ATM, and the next morning it wasn't there.
Yes.
I still remember those.
Yep. Either someone stole the ATM or the hotel took it out because someone was hacking it.
The hotel took it out because
any of those little
wasn't
standalone ATMs that are connected by like an Ethernet cable to some hotel network, just steer away from
them. Yeah. Go to, like, basically, if you need to have cash on you, like, use an ATM before you get to the airport, or maybe even at the airport that you're leaving from, and get enough cash that will last you. I mean, cash over the past 15 years or so since I've been going to the conferences and stuff, not as much as of a requirement. Still is, depending on where you're going. Most places, especially like cabs, and then you have Uber now, right? So it's less of a requirement to have cash, but you should have some cash on you, certainly. As we know from traveling, all of us on the show and many of us listening know that when you travel, sometimes your credit card company is like, oh my God, you just like left the country or went to some place and we're going to disable your credit card. So like having cash is good.
Yep.
Cash is good. Always travel at least a couple $100, like general rule of thumb, of cash on you at all times. And I remember selling T-shirts at conferences as early. The first one we did that was actually ShmooCon 2006. And over time, people were like, I don't have cash. Like, that became more and more of a thing, right? Like, where it basically forced us to say, if we're going to sell something at a conference, we have to take Square. And even then, people were skeptical, and rightfully so. I don't blame you. I don't blame you at all for that. But yeah, so that's the whole thing about ATMs and money and stuff. One thing that I thought was interesting, number 15 on my list, was actually our good friend Josh Marpet and Sam, our operations manager, who now goes to a lot of conferences with us this year. In the future, she comes to conferences with us. And Sam is great. Operations manager, has a background in accounting, not computer security, right? And, what Josh said is basically, Sam, like... And anyone, it doesn't matter, male, female, whatever, age, doesn't matter. If you're coming to a conference, have other people's cell phone numbers on you at various, in varying degrees, so that if you're in any kind of a situation, you can safely text someone or call someone, provided you have your phone, which was covered in the previous segment. Have your phone and call someone and get out of a situation or whatever. And Josh was like, Sam, we're going to give you numbers of trusted people within, our circle. Like, I totally trust Josh Marpet. Like, Sam should have Josh's phone number. So if Sam's at a conference, I know that she can call or text Josh, and Josh will come get her or help her out of a situation. But that goes for anyone, right? Like, have each other's cell phone numbers in and readily available on your phone in case, you're like, I lost my wallet. I can't find my room. I have too much to drink and require assistance. I can't find my pants. I'm stranded at a party / strip club / gas station / underground poker tournament. I've been arrested. There's a dead hooker in my room.
I'm in big trouble.
Right. I'm trapped in an elevator. I can't find the party. I've been kidnapped by ninjas. Like, the scenarios just go on for a long time about you need trusted people's numbers in your cell phone to call if you're at a conference or just traveling in general, especially to a conference in mixed company. So
yeah, it's the phone a friend thing, right? And we all, those of us who know each other in the community, we absolutely all respect each other, and we would do anything that we could within our power to help you out. So it's important.
Have people you trust in your. Because we've all, sometimes you have too much to drink and you can't find your room. And
No,
you
that's
want
never
a
happened to
friend.
us
You
as
want
a
a friend to
call.
help you back to your room, right? Like that happen. It happens. Everyone runs into those scenarios, especially at hacker. You're in a mixed environment and whatever, and drinking and having a good time, and you can get out of hand. Certainly, we've all been there. But have a trusted person in your cell phone for sure.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. In my case, one of the things I have to remember now is to always carry with me my passport. After my last experience at DerbyCon, where a security guard kept saying, "Show me proof of citizenship." I show him my driver's license. Says that's fake. So, given the political scenario, I think that's another thing I'm going to carry.
That's interesting. So, Carlos, in my case, I have two passports. So it would be pick the passport, but in the United States, I'd probably pick the U.S. passport, of course. But
yes, I agree, John.
I think that's definitely a relevant comment, given the political situation of today. I think that's relevant.
Dude, recently, a Puerto Rican ICE arrested him and was trying to go through the process of deporting him. After 24 hours, they figured out that, you're a U.S. citizen. Crap. And they let him go.
Not good. Number 16, on any device you bring to the conference, make sure it's up to date. Now, that's not saying you're not going to get hacked, right? But my advice is like an exercise that I'm just like, it's like second nature at this point because I've been to so many security conferences. Like no matter how late it is and how early I have to get up. So the conferences, and Keith, who I don't know if he's still here, and Mark and Riley and Sam and all of us that have been to 4 conferences in just over a month. And some of those, 3 of those were actually in Boston, and one was in Orlando. I think all of them we had to be up really early, right? Like for Boston, we were up. So for those that don't know geographics and logistics, in Rhode Island to drive from Rhode Island to Boston, well, it's only like a less than an hour drive to get to Boston.
Yeah, it's 45 minutes.
Yeah, but dude, traffic is like insane. So to beat the traffic, like you have to be. My rule with the crew now is if we're going to Boston on a weekday, you got to be on, like, leaving the parking lot here at the studio by, like, around 5 a.m. And that includes time to stop at Dunkin' Donuts right before the highway so we can get coffee, breakfast, whatever we need, and drive to Boston. So, like, legit, you're up at 4:30 in the morning. And even the night before, I'm like, I know I have to be at 4:30 in the morning, but it can be 10, 11 o'clock at night. And I'm like, force a habit, I got to make sure that my phone, whatever device I'm bringing, if it's a laptop, if I have to present, has to be up to date with the operating system, all software, the whole thing. Yep. I go through the check. I make sure all my wireless is disabled, like all that stuff. But in this case, number 60, make sure all of your stuff is patched before you go.
And not only that, disable all services that you don't need. One of the neat tricks I like to do in conferences is do an MDM enumeration, the multicast domain enumeration.
Oh, yeah, we talked about that years ago, Carlos. That's still valid, though. Yep.
A lot of people think, I'm so secure, I have my firewall on, and they forgot that when they enable, for example, remote whatever on their Mac, all of a sudden it's going to appear to the entire network. Like VNC, SSH, you're announcing those protocols, and they don't know that their machine's actually publishing that. Same thing happens with Windows 10 and Windows 7 starts publishing to the network. Hey, I have a chair. I have this open. Make sure that you go in. Is my firewall enabled? Yes, no. What are my services? Do I need to disable any that I probably use at home, but I'm not going to need here?
Yeah, absolutely. That is, I go through that as well. Just go ahead and make sure your firewall is properly configured, that your services are set up properly in a restricted manner. Because and frankly, I got to the point where I don't turn on wireless or Bluetooth adapters at all when I'm at a conference if I can help it.
Yep.
Because it's just too risky.
I agree.
There's so many exploit vectors out there. So Better
Number
to stay
17 is interesting. Dave Kennedy was actually just talking about this on Facebook, and we're running this segment on the show. Dave was like, hey, like this morning I got an in-app message in Facebook that said I need to update. Like, he's like, that's weird. And so my thing was, like, if an application's acting funny and giving you error messages that you don't expect, an SSL certificate error, God forbid, that's bad, or just doing anything that, like, you think is not normal, either, like, right before or especially while you're at the conference, like, don't, first of all, like, don't click on that, close the app, and Dave actually takes the extra step, which I appreciate, and I think he's right. He's like, wipe your phone. Like, right there, like, wipe your phone. Like, that's it. Like, it's done. You got a funny message on your phone. If you're at a conference, like, that's game over. Like, that's something funny is happening.
Just wipe it. Yeah.
It kind of reminds me of a story of Martin Bose, Pure Hate, and Bravo Hacks. They went over to a specific country, and while they were waiting in customs, Bravo Hacks did the error of having his Android phone to auto-update. And as they left Japan to this other country, and all of a sudden they made sure their phones were completely updated. And as soon as they landed, Bravo Hack's phone, Skype, Google Hangouts, all communications apps in his Android got updated all of a sudden, suspiciously.
So that's interesting, Carlos. So and Dave was talking about this, like, I set my apps to auto-update, thinking that it's more secure. But now I'm really questioning, like, that's a bad idea then.
Well, back in the old days, probably, because the only checks that were happening were for some of the SSL certificates, and if the application was properly signed. But as we know, getting a code signed certificate is not that difficult. If you have $500, you can get one. Or and when we're talking right now about countries going one after the other, and we're talking about SSL, one of the things to consider is when you go over into your list of authorized CAs, you're going to find the government of China, you're going to buy the Hong Kong Post Office, you're going to find all kinds of people that are already trusted CAs in your machine. Yeah. So probably having that code signing certificate is not enough to probably protect your device from a malicious actor.
So what if we were to auto-update, but then the night before we're going to the conference, turn off auto-updating and be like,
that would be a good that would be a good process.
Yeah, I think that is a good strategy, because, you know, if you're in it's sort of OPSEC, right? If you're in an unknown environment, best not to take the risk, right? Just turn off the auto-update. And wait till you're in an environment you can trust.
Yep, I agree.
Yeah, you guys remember the tool that a guy from Argentina wrote, which was the what was its name? That allow you to intercept updates.
What was that software called, Carlos? I was thinking the same thing.
Yeah, I don't remember. I know the guy was from Argentina who wrote it, but now the name of the tool is escaping me. Those tools are out there, and people can actually buy certificates nowadays easier than ever. And one of the things probably would be look if your apps support certificate pinning and use those.
Yep.
And trust those more than others.
Yeah.
Now, what's interesting
that's interesting. Certificate pinning is something that's not widely advertised in the app, right? You don't really know, like, it's a browser or whatever. It's like there's no way to really know that certificate is pinning is in effect. So and certainly for the update apps, you don't know.
At least with Windows, you can do it via Emmet. Emmet will allow you to do certificate pinning rules for everything that you use with Edge or Internet Explorer. The only problem is that then you're limited to Edge and Internet Explorer.
Yeah, I was going to say that doesn't help you with your phone.
Number 18, the passports, credit cards, or any other cards with RFID should either be left at home. Now, your passport you can't leave at home, right? But, like, think about your OPSEC when it comes to any RFID-enabled system. Have a passport or RFID shielding wallet, or leave that in the safe if it's something you don't need while you're at the conference, but be aware of the chips and active technologies that are in your credit cards, passports, and things of that nature, your access cards. And what's interesting is I have it was John's brother, actually, Brian, that was asking for recommendations for a wallet. And I love the Travax wallet. In fact, we'll probably run a segment about like everyday carry stuff that I carry with me all the time, which I ran on my cigar show, and I want to run here in the context of security. But the Travax wallets like claim some kind of RFID shielding. However, if my access card, like for the cigar lounge next door, which is RFID, is in that wallet, it still works. So while I love the Travax wallets, is my recommendation for that for a wallet. When you travel, you might want to consider other options or other ways to obfuscate your RFID signature on your passports, credit cards, and in access cards.
Well, see, that's an interesting topic, Paul, because I've carried a wallet for probably a decade now that is an RFID shielding wallet. And to be honest, I've never actually tested it to see if it actually works, right? I've trusted that, the little copper coil in there, in this case, it's a leather wallet, actually functions.
They do work. They do work. Someone gave me one. Can't remember his name. He's going to be mad at me, but he's a great guy. Gave me one to test, and it did work. And so now that I think about it, like inside of your pocket, I could actually keep an RFID shielding like pocket. It was like a pouch, right, that has RFID shielding on it. It was made by a company. I'm sure you could probably find them. And the Travax wallet's really small, so I could drop that. In fact, I'm going to do that. I'm going to drop that in my pocket and keep that in the pouch so that when you use your wallet, you take it out of the pouch and then put it back in so that all of your stuff is RFID shielded. And I actually tested that, Joff, and it did work to shield any RF communications.
Oh, that's fantastic. I mean, the other one a lot of people don't realize is the one you just mentioned, and that is passports these days do have RFID transmitting chips in them. Now, there's one surefire way to fix that, and that's a hammer.
People were microwaving them or microwaving credit cards way back in the day.
But that's not necessarily recommended. Some people take offense to that, and some governments don't like that, et cetera, et cetera.
Yes.
But it is a surefire way to fix it. But I think
U.S.
just
Customs
as you
is one that
said
takes
with the
very big offense.
The shield idea, like if you have a pocket that you could put the passport in that had a shield around it, then you can effectively do the same thing. All right.
Yep.
Yeah. I have to say, U.S. Customs is one that really takes big offense if you microwave your passport.
I gotcha.
It is a visit to the room with the table, with the metal table and the gloves.
The metal folding chair in the room with just a light hanging, like just a light bulb hanging from an electrical wire.
I've been in that room several times, and they don't have a single light, but I can tell almost always it is galvanized steel or aluminum table where they take you in. I really like the idea of the pouch because I tend to go and use a front pocket wallet. Is what I use. I have one from Recycle Firefighter, which is made out of recycled fireman hoses.
Yeah. I've heard of that. Yeah.
And I like the idea of the pouch because I really like this wallet that I keep in my front pocket. Now that, sadly, I'm approaching my 40s and it turns out that I have osteoarthritis on my hips, I can no longer keep a wallet in my back pocket without feeling it at the end of the day, feeling some pain.
Now, Carlos, you're the one that turned me on to tactical pants from 511 and Blackhawk. And I always keep my wallet in one of those pockets in those tactical pants when I go to a security conference. And they have more. Okay. They actually have some pretty stylish ones now. So it doesn't look so much like they've come a long way in terms of style and function. I think there's a lot of options. And I always keep it in the side pocket as well. I haven't carried a wallet in my back pocket like the George Costanza, like Seinfeld episode.
I've been a front pocket guy forever, but what you're seeing on the screen is the world's smallest violin, as I am now 50. So whatever,
there you go,
fellas.
In my case, sadly, osteoarthritis started with me early. So
that's
Well,
that's
I
a
mean,
real-
and people kind of make fun of like the tactical pants. They're like, why are you wearing tactical pants? Like, you're not in the military. I'm like, my other option is like a fanny pack. Like, come on now. Like, if your choice is tactical pants or fanny pack, like, come on now.
now after doing a Grok Tough, my favorite pants have to be the triple AUG pants that they sell, especially the AC ones, the aquatics.
Oh, you're going to have to send me that one,
super
Carlos.
fast, they're super light, and especially when you're packing, since they're like hiking pants out of nylon, they're super
Yay,
light, super
hacking
thin, so I
pants.
can pack them.
I want hacking pants. That's awesome. It's hacking time. I'm going to put my hacking pants on.
Well, with all their pockets, you can pretty much pack whatever
You can put a Raspberry Pi right in one side, right? Like smartphone.
Oh,
yeah.
Get a beagle bone in the other
That's
side.
right.
Oh,
I love it.
hacking pants,
hacking
baby.
pants. They come with a Raspberry Pi in the pocket. And so the last two that I have on my list, 19 and 20, are related to your hotel room when you're staying at the conference, which I thought was important to cover in this segment. So number one, out of two, in the last 19 and 20, right? Never tell anyone your room number, and never write down your room number on your key or anything like that. And I have
Unless she's hot.
I have like very vivid memories of people who did social engineering attacks to figure out what room number I'm in. My like room phone ringing at 3 a.m. at ShmooCon. Thanks, Trent. And so, like, never give anyone your room. I mean, this is just like personal security. Male, female, doesn't matter. Like, never give anyone your room number. Guard your room key, and never like write down, because I mean, it is something to remember.
Oh yeah.
In terms of like what your room number is, especially the first night. You know, you come off a plane, and how many times have we done this? Right, come off a plane, you check in, and your friends are texting you, and you go to the bar and you decompress for a while. You have a few drinks with your friends you haven't seen in a while, and you drink, and then you go back to your room, and you're like, what was my room number again?
Okay, so I have a memory trick here, Paul.
Yes.
Okay, for all those in the geek space, which is many of us listening, think of the nearest binary number to your room number. It is awesome if you get 255 or 256, right? It is doubly awesome if you get like 128, 129, 64, 63. These kinds of numbers are fantastic because you can remember them as binary numbers in a beautiful, beautiful way. So just a little trick, I'm just saying.
That's like the nerdiest thing I've heard in a long time, Joff, just in case you're wondering.
Well,
you know what brought to me very vividly of being careful with my room number and everything is on one of the ShmooCons, I still remember somebody found out what was Dave Kennedy's room, and they went to the sex shop that was down the street, and they bought all of their dildos and all of the sex dolls and everything. And when Dave came at one moment to his room was completely plastered with all of that stuff in it. I don't want to imagine the face of the cleaning lady when she went in that day.
It's awesome. Speaking of the cleaning lady, so the other thing on the room thing, there's probably more than just two things here, right? If you've ever met Deviant and taken his class or seen his presentations, he talks about the device. And I don't know if he came up with the device or just talked about it in general. He's the one that, in my experience, popularized it, is basically like the metal device that you slip under the door of the room that pulls the handle from the other side.
Oh,
and
gee.
that's a scary. Now, when you're in your room, right, that's one thing. You can lock the deadbolt, and you can put the safety thing at the top. Always do that when you're in your room. However, at a conference, you're obviously not always in your room, and that can be scary. So lock the deadbolt, put the thing over. I always roll up a towel, one of the hand towels from the room, and put it in the handle, which makes it more difficult if someone's slipping a device under the door to pull that handle. And this is all stuff when you're in your room.
Yeah, when I got training for MPE, which is non-permissive environments, when I used to travel a lot to South America, one of the things that actually was taught to us by an instructor was to put a set of keys on top of the handle of the door. So if anybody came in and jiggled the door or tried to move it a bit or anything, those keys were going to fall and automatically give you kind of a small alarm that somebody was up to something. And sometimes they would recommend, some of these hotels actually put up a large metal plate on the night table or somewhere, or a glass plate. Take that glass plate
that'll make a bunch of noise,
under the handle and put a set of keys on top of it. So when somebody jiggles, now you hear that noise even louder.
Right.
Yeah.
And along those lines, when you leave your room, never leave your laptop in your room unattended, right? And this was popularized, actually, at Black Hat was the first time that I had learned about these attacks happening. And I think since then, when at least the major security conferences go to a hotel, hotel staff has actually been briefed on this attack, the Hotel Maid attack we talked about on the show many years ago. And essentially, like, if I leave my laptop on the desk in the room and I go to breakfast, lunch, or dinner or whatever, the maid goes in the room, opens the room, is cleaning the room, the door is open. You, not you, but someone else goes to the maid and says, "Oh, I need to just go in my room and get my laptop," and takes your laptop and steals it.
Yeah.
Very valid, absolutely valid attack. Now, much less frequently occurring because user education has persisted. However, don't trust that by any stretch of the imagination. Never leave your laptop in your room if it's not in the safe or with you. Right, because
absolutely.
And even in the safe, you have to be careful. I still remember the Gruck at, I think it was Black Hat or the DEF CON. He left his MacBook Air and a couple of other things. He put them in the safe, and he took a picture of the safe before he left. And when he came back, he compared the picture to when he opened the safe, and stuff had been moved. And he went like, "Well, there goes a MacBook Air. I'm not using that laptop anymore." Somebody got in, somebody fidgeted with the equipment. I know I have friends that actually go into his daughter's bedroom and he selects the weirdest, most strange nail polish, and he'll put a dab of nail polish on each one of these screws on his laptop. And so when he puts it in the safe and puts some stuff in it and takes a picture, also he has another visual that he can go in and check, because he says, "Dude, if anybody's going into my room and doing an implant on my laptop, I doubt that they're going to be carrying with them a case full of every type of nail polish."
Right.
With them to cover against those screws.
Yep.
Good advice.
All good advice. Yeah, never. And so the other trick that I do as well, even if we're going out to dinner, right? Like typically at a conference, like you do your thing, you go back to your room, and you drop your stuff off, right, in your room, which could be your laptop or tablet or Chromebook, whatever, and you put it in the safe, right? Lock the safe, and we all know like safes have been broken into in a hotel. Like they're not that great. They vary, but they're not that great in the room. I always, whenever I'm not in my room, especially at night when your room is not typically going to be clean, I don't care about turn down service, whatever that shit is, right? When I leave during the day, I take my laptop with me because I'm either presenting or I have my laptop with me. At night when I'm going out to dinner, I'll drop my stuff in my room, put it in the safe, and when I leave my room, I put do not disturb so that it increases the chance that the cleaning service or the maids aren't going to open my door. Right. So I always, whenever I'm not in my room, when my stuff is in there, electronics, that your do not disturb is there. That's another good OPSEC thing.
Yeah, I totally agree with that recommendation, Paul. I'm the same way. If my stuff is ever in my room, the do not disturb sign gets put up. Just to avoid that social engineering opportunity that you just mentioned, where somebody's going to come by and go, "Oh, the maid's in the room. Hey, that's my laptop. Let me come in there."
Yep.
Or whatever, right? So, yeah.
In my case, I always carry it with me. I just put it in my bag and just go with it wherever I go.
And that's a valid strategy. I'm not. That's a valid. A lot of times though, when I'm going to dinner, like I just can't carry it with me, so I take the risk. I'll put it in the safe and put the do not disturb on the door. is my strategy. So
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, it's not always convenient, right? But like Carlos was saying, the golden rule is take your gear with you whenever you're not in the room.
yeah, it's actually one reason why like I got a Chromebook, because it's a lot smaller and more portable. That I want to see if it fits in one of my smaller bags, which is kind of like a fanny pack. It's a tactical fanny pack, but it's like a fanny pack, right? It's like a sling that I can stuff my Chromebook in that and take that with me when I go at all times. So I'm not carrying. Now, Carlos, like in Java, like in even myself, like when you're teaching, you need a lot more gear. That's not always feasible.
Oh, yeah.
If I'm going to a conference, I'm going to present. I want to take a Chromebook, and I know I'm limiting myself in terms of the type of work I'm going to be doing at the conference, shorter conferences, shorter travel. I'll just take my Chromebook now as my strategy and keep it with me at all times, and it's a lot easier.
Another one is just get a Pelican case and put a lock on it.
Yeah, no, that's a good one, Carlos. I like that.
Get a lock.
that's
I
good.
have friends that travel with the. Oh, what's the number? It's 29 something, I think it is, which is the one that is the exact size for carry-on.
Yep.
And they'll just go into the room, put the laptop in, put 2 locks in it, and that's how they leave their stuff, their gear there.
I'd also get like another lock and lock it to something in the room so they can't take the case.
Yeah.
Right. Lock the case down.
Right.
Yeah.
Somebody comes in, they have to know lock picking, and they have to be good at it.
Right. Or, if they want to come in and steal the case, that's another thing. But
Well, I mean, it's all about the usual thing, right? If you can delay somebody long enough, more than likely somebody else is going to come along and go, what are you doing?
yeah.
It all depends on what is your risk matrix. What are you afraid of?
Right.
Are you afraid of somebody stealing your data, installing something on your laptop, or stealing your laptop? And your actions are going to be around those 3 different scenarios.
That's right. Yep.
All righty. With that, we're going to take a short break, come back, and talk about the security news for this week. So stay tuned. Don't go anywhere.
All right.
The average time between being hacked and realizing you've been hacked is 1 year. Can you afford to let an intruder roam your network for that long? Can your company weather the fallout when this comes to light? Black Hills Information Security can find the bad guys in your network and train you to do it yourself. Email consulting@blackhillsinfosec.com to find out how a hunt teaming engagement can help you find a persistent threat in your network. Signal Sciences is the industry's first web protection platform that works in any cloud, any container, any platform as a service, and any modern application architecture. The Signal Sciences web protection platform can be deployed in next-generation WAF, RASP, or reverse proxy modes, giving customers ultimate flexibility and coverage. Protect your web applications with Signal Sciences web protection platform. Signal Sciences, securing code and connecting teams. For more information, check them out at signalsciences.com/ESW. Has your network been breached? Cybereason can help you answer this question. Cybereason products hunt for threats within your network and eliminate them in real time. To Cybereason, real time means within seconds. Founded by former military hackers who don't play by the rules, they've built this experience into their platform. Harness ingenuity and imagination, not just code, to defeat attackers. Cybereason, disrupt the adversary and let the hunt begin. Welcome back, everyone, to Security Weekly. I'm here with Joff and Carlos, and I want to talk about ad blockers. Dude, I hate advertisements on websites. And I know in security we're not alone, but I also think in security we have a heightened awareness to ads and ad blockers. And we're still actually using that technology I covered in a previous technical segment about putting up servers in the cloud to block ad domains by DNS. Joff, I don't know if you were here for that one, but you and I have collaborated on a couple of tech segments. It's like 3 tech segments that we've done collectively, I think even this year, even on ad blocking, because we believe it's very important. There was an
Absolutely.
article from Bruce Schneier, actually, that linked to some research from academic researchers who've published a plugin for Chrome that doesn't block ads, but it identifies them. And they're using some really new techniques to do that. Now, the details are kind of fuzzy for me, but one of the things that got me was it's a rat race, right? To block ads. Like very similar to security, like as we come up with methods to block ads, advertisers come up with methods to evade those techniques. And it's very much related to security, so much so that to defeat some anti-ad blockers, they've borrowed techniques from rootkits, which are often used for malware to hide the existence of their activities from ad blocking detectors. So basically, your ad blocking is like a rootkit so that it can evade detection from the websites that are trying to detect that you have an ad blocker installed. And they're basically running on the premise that browser extensions are given a higher privilege than the code. So they're given a higher privilege than advertisements and ad blocker detectors. So basically, a Chrome or Firefox extension has a higher privilege than the code that's loaded from a website that you visited. And they're using that to their advantage to evade advertisements, which I think is awesome. Now, I also get it from an economics perspective, right? Like a lot of these websites do run on ads, and I get that. However, number one, people don't really want to see ads, for one. And number two, that relates to our field, like advertisements can contain exploits for your browser or whatever. And we've seen that throughout the past almost 12 years of this show. So I think it's a really important issue for us to talk about. And I hate to have a negative opinion of those in the press, because to a certain extent we are the press as well. But like Wired and Forbes, New York Times, like they're really like taking a really sharp stance on like ad blockers. They're like, you have an ad blocker installed in your browser. So like, here are your options. Like either you register and pay us $1 a month, or you can't see the content. And I'm like, yeah, that's messed up.
Well, you know what's also interesting, Paul, it's very, very timely that you mentioned this, because I was actually just in the process of writing a paper for on ad blocker technology. And what's really fascinating is a couple of years ago, Google actually did a study, a pretty extensive study with the University of California, Santa Barbara. And they talked about the adware ecosystem. And it goes even deeper than just purely sort of the domain blocking space. The market is split out into essentially JavaScript document object model libraries that act as content deliverers, and then a sort of subset of the market that are content providers. And so it's kind of a complex ecosystem. I hate to use that word. I never like ecosystem with business, but so it's sophisticated, it's complex, and it definitely has some blurred lines and crossover with malicious software.
Yep.
And so
and look, dude, like I get it. Like it's more complicated for content sites that are solely based on the content on their website. Like us as a podcast, we're more about the podcast content, right? And on our website, we do have banner ads, right? But they're very simplistic. And in fact, they bypass a lot of the ad blockers because they are just very simplistic, right? Like it's a banner at the top of the site, and I'm just putting up an image, and that image has a link. And that actually tends to bypass a lot of ad blockers today, which is kind of interesting, but it's very simplistic. And again, it's not like 100% of our revenue isn't coming from those advertisements on that site. And I get it. Sites like Wired that have to get away from traditional print media, they got to like bet the bank in their business on these ad sites, which means it has to be more dynamic, and it has to incorporate a lot more components than we have to incorporate in our site. Like
That's right.
I wrote
Yeah.
the JavaScript on our wiki, for example, that just displays a random image with a link to our sponsors, right? And that's all it is. And it evades most of the ad blockers today. You could write a custom rule that would block them. But, I mean, chances are if you're coming to us, you've heard the advertisements for our sponsors on the show. And, hey, look, it's just an image. Like, I'm not putting an iframe, this dynamically loading content from some other site into your browser. But I also get where other sites, that's the model that they have. And that's interesting and highly annoying.
I have a significant problem with some of the ad blockers. I know they have good intent, but the part that concerns me is that you add in this browser plugin, and then these ad blockers have authority essentially over the document object model, especially with respect to JavaScript in your browser. And there is a sort of malicious underside of this.
Mm-hmm.
Well, maybe not malicious, but there's sort of commercial underside of this where some advertisers can pay the ad blockers to whitelist their content.
We've covered that. Yep.
Yep. And so this concept is it's just really bothersome to me that you're turning over all the trust of your browser to this ad blocker, which can modify JavaScript, inline in the DOM, and then B, that you have this actual additional market that's layered on top of that.
Mm-hmm.
And not only that, you're also bringing your attack surface up. Now it is something additional that an attacker can actually attack, which is that extension.
Exactly. So it's not the ad blocker. I see what they're going after, but it's not the perfect solution. And I've been writing about this week. In fact, I think the solution sort of resides in three different areas. One is potentially browser plugins. Certainly, there's a market there. There's certainly a market in the perimeter proxy space. Where proxies can modify content inline, in transit. And then I think there's potential there, and certainly it's already exhibited in the value-added DNS services, which are doing categorization on domain filtering. But it's not a trivial problem to solve if you're interested in totally eliminating advertisements, because
check out this research, Joff. I mean, Bruce and I was like, he didn't think it was gonna be 100% like this is gonna block all ads, but he thought it got pretty close. And I didn't have enough time to like glean from the article exactly all of the things that they were doing. But check it out and like report back to us on what you thought of this, since you're doing research in this area. Like, they're doing some pretty cool research, and I'm curious to get your thoughts on it. So definitely check it out. Definitely
check it out. Maybe we can report back next week on the show as to my results. But
Now on Sans ISC, Joff, and this is in your domain, and I know I frequently call in Carlos for Windows stuff, and we'll get to that. But Johannes posted an article that said BGP hijacking, like the internet is still broken, and basically talked about some of the fundamental issues with BGP. And I'm not sure what prompted this. He talks about BGP Mon for monitoring your BGP. This is nothing new, right? I mean, these are just some of the fundamental issues that speak to the protocols that basically run the internet today.
You're right. It's nothing new. I think BGP has been sort of operating from a security perspective under a sort of obscurity umbrella for some time, right? The more research that's done in how to modify and attack BGP, the more we're going to see come out. But that notwithstanding, there are many ISP operations that unfortunately do not employ best practices with BGP, and so you have this spectrum of providers out there, which provides some opportunity. I think it's lesser exploited in general because it's sort of self-defeating. Anything you do with BGP is going to be by its nature either a denial of service or either B, injection of preferable routes. Now, the B option is more interesting, right? Because if you can say, I can inject a longer prefix that is a preferable route for some destination, then you're in the position of redirecting traffic, which is way more interesting than denial of service. And in the B case, many of the tier 1, tier 2 providers in the BGP space are doing prefix filtering if they know what they're doing in terms of stopping any prefixes longer than a certain number in the bit space. Let's say we take IPv4. A lot of providers will say, well, I'm not going to accept routes any longer than /24 because I don't trust them, for example. So there are some good best security practices that help us in the BGP space. I don't think anything's necessarily new, but I do think that the best practices that are out there in terms of authenticating peers, in terms of cutting off prefixes that are only shorter than a certain threshold, in terms of AS path filtering, all these things are very good practices for most ISPs to adopt. Unfortunately, not all of them do exactly that.
I want to transition, Carlos. I don't know if you read the article that references some researchers from Endgame that talk about bypassing control flow integrity and control flow guard that was built into Windows 10 in a technique called counterfeit object-oriented programming. Are you familiar with that, Carlos?
I am not, sadly.
It's some of the new protections that Microsoft built into Windows 10. And
in fact, it's one that I think came also from Emmet, and they integrated into
Windows 10. Yep. You're probably right. It's interesting because it speaks to how we've seen a lot of bypass techniques happen in our industry, in that there are academic and theoretical papers that are like, hey, this is how you bypass that. And then somewhat slowly I say in context of our industry, slowly over time, people are like, wow, that theory could become practice. And that looks like what Endgame is doing here today in making some of the bypasses for Control Flow Guard come to light today. They reference a 2015 IEEE paper and are making that practice today, which is interesting. And I want to get someone from Endgame on to talk about that, but I thought it was interesting.
Yeah, at the end of the game, I have to applaud Microsoft. They're making it harder and harder for attackers to actually be able to execute reliably on the system. I really wish Apple and some of the Linux distros would start moving as fast as they are on that side.
Yeah. So let me transition to another topic that I was speaking with my good friend Dan King about at Source Boston yesterday, and that is no one adopts the newer technology from Microsoft that implements all these features, Carlos. We touched on this in previous episodes, right? We're still talking about, in fact, I'm going to probably update my talk to talk about SMB V1 versus V2, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And all of those things. And while, like you said, Carlos, Microsoft is doing some awesome things in the newer versions of their operating systems, however, those 5 or 6 really fundamental things you can do to protect your Active Directory environment, no one does. And that's really one of my number one concerns today.
Yeah, and now we're seeing DoD is kind of learning their lesson. In fact, I'm surprised how fast DoD has been um adopting Windows 10. I remember I've done 2 classes in the Maryland area, and every time I go over there to teach, all of them have Windows 10 laptops. And on one of my classes, I was fortunate enough that I had to deliver it inside of a skiff, and I remember all of the machines were Windows 10.
That's good.
So
That's good news.
so they're moving fast.
Yeah, that's it's really interesting because what you speak to, Paul, is the whole victim of their own success problem, right? I mean, Microsoft's doing really well at delivering, better security features, but that legacy boat anchor they've got behind them is a huge challenge.
Huge.
Right?
And in the industry that scares me the most with that is healthcare. And I was at the keynote talk by Josh Corman at Source Boston yesterday, which Threatpost was there at Source and was actually posting a number of articles and tweets. They were actually had a couple of tweets about my talk, so thank you, Threatpost. That was awesome. Thank you for that. And they covered Josh's keynote talk. Now, a couple of key takeaways. Josh led his talk with information about CVE and how that there are, I want to say, upwards of 50,000 something CVEs in existence. And his claim, and I agree with his claim, and he called on me during the presentation, knowing that I've done a little bit of work in this area. He claims, he's like, these are only a certain percentage of all the vulnerabilities that exist today. And I agree. He also said that, any given IoT device could have about 1,000 CVEs. Now, if we all agree that CVE only encompasses a certain percentage, 80%, let's say, is I believe his figure of the vulnerabilities today, that's still missing a lot of vulnerabilities. And the fact that your IoT device may have about 1,000 means it has a lot more vulnerabilities. I kind of chimed in, and he called on me, and I was like, most vulnerability scanning products have 50, 60% of those vulnerabilities of all the total CVE. Now, I want to preface that with, I didn't want to steal Josh's thunder and give too much information in his talk, but I will preface that with, Carlos knows you work for Tenable today. I worked for Tenable for a long time, and I studied this field for a long time. In a vulnerability scanner today that exists on the market, you may cover CVEs, but you've got other plugins and checks that check for stuff that you're not necessarily relating back to a CVE, so your coverage is a lot more than what you think. In other words, I may have a generic check for cross-site scripting, right, which, I may cover X amount of CVEs that relate to cross-site scripting, but I cover another 25 or 30% that I don't relate back to a CVE because I have a generic check for cross-site scripting. And that's probably a bad example, but you get what I'm talking about, right?
And you can see it probably in misconfigurations. How do you configure share, access to the shares?
Yeah, absolutely. So the coverage is a lot better. But, when we get down to healthcare, some of his points were kind of scary in that we have these devices that are definitely missing known CVEs. Then think about the other things that they're missing. But the other thing that was interesting about legacy applications in healthcare, to kind of transition to a totally different problem, right? And I think we do have a CVE problem. I agree with Josh. I think as a community, we need to support CVE and grow that. Because when something gets a CVE, it's got a much better chance of getting attention in an enterprise. I agree with that. We need to work towards that goal. Table that issue for a moment. Work on that as a community. But when we look at healthcare and we look at the legacy applications and the fact that a lot of healthcare organizations don't have the security talent they need, how do we get those legacy systems to be up to speed? And Josh actually mentioned my tweet that I talked about in my talk. We're very complimentary in our talks at Source yesterday. This is, when my wife was in labor last June, that I was like, wow, like, hey, there's the baby's heartbeat. And I was like, wow, like that's Windows 98. And we had the segment with Josh and Katie Mazuris on the show to talk about that. And I'm like, if you're Windows 95 or 98, as I've spoken, or OS 10 even, as I've spoken about in previous presentations that I've given, like you're way behind in terms of securing your Active Directory environment. And couple that with you don't have the staff to get you there, can leave you in a really bad position, especially as a healthcare environment. Like, if you want to secure an Active Directory environment, you need to disable a bunch of stuff that basically breaks a bunch of stuff in 95 and 98. And if we're saying that healthcare has a lot of those legacy systems, how do we get everything up to date? And that was basically the gist of this Threat Post article that probably scared me the most in terms of security today. And you give a lot of other examples as well. Source, the year of the Boston marathon bombings, there was a Source conference around the same time, and actually a lot of speakers couldn't get there. And the scenario that he gave was, well, what if they coupled that with an attack on a healthcare organization? Like basically the low loss of life from a catastrophic event such as the Boston Marathon bombing is due to healthcare's ability to respond. What if a cyber attack were to cripple that? And that was a very scary scenario to me, and made me think we need to really focus on, given that we gave the segment a while back, we need to really focus on that because security in healthcare is important for a lot of reasons.
Yeah, a great novel is The Perfect Storm. That is one that I was that I recommended to Larry, where the gist of the book is all of a sudden a bunch of systems start failing in New York as a heavy winter storm approaches, and all of the disaster that happened, and not to give the plot away, but it had to do with a series of cyber criminals doing certain actions that kind of created a cascade effect across all of the emergency systems, which caused this perfect storm what it mixed in with a natural event.
Yeah, it's an interesting problem because anybody, and I'm certainly not an expert by any means, so let me caveat by that. But anybody who's worked in healthcare knows that the number one priority for any of the IT systems is human safety, and then security is somewhere after that, right? But the human safety issue is the absolute, number one thing. And so given that that's the case, I think the argument for us as an industry is how do we directly join the security risk with human safety and make that convincing argument? Because if we were able to tap into that, then we're going to be able to make traction in terms of change, because that's the driving force.
Well,
right?
I think I'm going to go on a limb, and based on my conversations, with Josh, listening to this presentation, talking with him afterwards, like, I think we're there already, Joff. And the problem is, we recognize the problem, it's fixing it that's the hard part. So while patient safety is number one, right? Yeah. However, if systems are vulnerable, and let's say, for example, an attacker is able to impact a healthcare facility's ability to perform x-rays, right? When that happens, they have to divert patients to a different hospital. Like, they lose their ability to triage patients in an emergency care situation. Yeah. And they need to, I think they've already realized, I think they've come to that realization that like something as very simple as x-rays, which have been around for a very long time, are critical to patient care in terms of new patients coming in. And like what you're speaking to, Joff, is like once they're admitted as a patient, like their care, like an IV pump or something like that. And they're almost like two different things, right? And what Josh was kind of pointing out was like, hey, if a hospital can't do x-rays because of some cyber attack, they're useless in terms of triaging patients, and that's the issue. How we overcome that is the much harder problem to solve. How do we get hospitals and healthcare organizations off of those legacy systems so that they're more resilient to attacks that prevent them from triaging incoming patients, right? You look at the Boston Marathon attack, like an X-ray is my wife works in medical imaging, so I have a little bit of insight into that field, right, by osmosis, and it's a huge thing of triaging patients. And if you impact that, that is detrimental to the hospital. And how do we overcome that? Well, it means they need to not be running Windows 98 or whatever the legacy is. But how we get them off of that is a much larger issue. You know, you can put regulations on it, but it's still, like, who pays for that? Like, someone has to pay for the new systems. Someone has to, even if there's help, like, there's a whole, you can't just stop. Like, there has to be a project that moves them to the newer technology. Yeah. And that's where it was really like a scary realization to me about how big the problem was.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of the crossover of SCADA and medical altogether, right? Mm-hmm. But anyway, Carlos.
Yeah, I also see it as just pure human nature. We are techies, and we're going like, let's find a solution, something that we can do that is going to force its people to move to a new technology. Well, at the end of the day, it's a decision that somebody is doing, and they're doing it because dollars of cents or due to lack of knowledge. It is that human meatware, which is most of the time causing all of this problem. It is somebody that knows that they need the new technology. It is somebody that knows that they need a new X-ray machine, and they go like, do we have the budget? Yes, no. Do I want to invest my money somewhere else? Do I want to put money on training personnel to be able to deal with this? And they're making the ultimate decision, no, I'm not going to do this. I'm going to put my money somewhere else. And you can put regulations and more stuff. And at the end of the day, they're going to go, okay, then I'm going to take it all the way up to where the regulation is requiring me, not a step further. And then probably the regulations say you cannot use an operating system that is 2 versions behind or a version behind, and you fix that problem, and then you still have the problem of the flat network. You add a regulation for the flat network that they cannot have a flat network and they need segmentation, but now you have the problem with credentials, and you need to put that over into regulations, but you'll still keep going back that somebody knows that they need to do something and they don't do it, because regulations will not be able to move fast enough. Congress doesn't move fast enough. All the spies do not move fast enough.
What Josh and I talked about, Carlos, was getting ahead of it and somewhat munged the conversation between Josh and I. I think we need to have him back on the show to talk about this, but he was like, you have to take into consideration the development time for, like, let's say the three of us want to create a medical imaging device, and if that's 6 years in development, and at the start we're using a supported Microsoft operating system, like, Microsoft's going to discontinue support for that in 8 years, right? But the device is going to be in use for 15 years, and it's a math problem, right? And that's why we're in this situation today. Is the three of us decide, hey, we're going to do medical imaging. Takes 6 years before we get FDA approval to get our product to market and do all the research and development. And by that time, there might be 2 years where Microsoft supports the operating system. Then it falls out of support. Then it's the 15-year mark where our technology is still in use, and that leaves a really big window of vulnerability and exposures for our product. And the FDA is actually, in one of the wins here that I see is that Josh is educating, and others in the space, not just Josh, but others are educating the government and legislation to say that's not acceptable. Like, you need to rethink your model about approval of these devices, taking into account how long the operating system is supported, how long the device has been in use, what the patching cycle is for these devices. And the positive thing that came from his talk, but he presented like 6 or 8 slides. Like they're making progress on this particular issue to say you can't introduce products into the market that are going to leave organizations in the healthcare in this situation where devices are vulnerable. And I think that was the huge takeaway for me in a positive light, that we're actually, people like Josh are making inroads to make this problem go away and make it less of an issue moving forward. And that was really cool.
Yeah, that is cool. Yeah.
Yeah. That's a very good approach.
Yeah, it made me think, and I think everyone when the video is posted, watch Josh's video. I think it's really good, and it makes you kind of think about the problem in a different way. And Josh was very scary. I think it was more scary than positive, but there were some really good positive takeaways that all of us need to think about. So that it's really about resiliency, and that's one of the things that Josh, I think, really honed in on over the years is our systems have to be resilient. And I think previously we were really setting ourselves up to not be resilient. And by educating Congress and legislation and government bodies like the FDA, it helps our systems be more resilient to these attacks. And that was one of my huge takeaways from Source, which glad to have the opportunity to see Josh's keynote and talk with him. So we did talk about IoT a lot yesterday. And it was interesting. The article I want to talk about with respects to IoT is this whole Hajim is there's a couple of botnets running around. Hajim is one. The Breaker botnet, I think, was another one that basically, in this case of Hajim, I want to say, Hajim was like, hey, we're going to break into your device and we're a white hat hacker and we're going to tell you that it's good. And the example, which was funny, that we were talking about yesterday in Mixed Company was it's never a good idea to create a worm that breaks into systems and claims to do a good thing. That's never really worked out for us. And this is that, do you trust an attacker? And okay, if someone wants to break into all these IoT devices and put a message that says, oh, I'm just a white hat securing your systems, are you going to trust that person? Why are you going to do that? And how IoT botnets have spread, through the internet, whether their intention is evil or good, I all think it's bad. And I think that the takeaway for me in giving my IoT talk was, researchers kind of move the needle talking about vulnerabilities in IoT a little bit. Mirai really moved the needle a lot. These newer botnets move the needle a little bit more, but it's still at 60%. I think it's the rest of that 40% that's going to push it over the edge and really make us reconsider IoT security. And if we don't get involved now with potential regulation, and Bruce Schneider is pushing for a lot of regulation, some people are pushing for no regulation, and everyone else in between, I think we're going to fall somewhere in between. I don't think Bruce is going to get the regulatory body to regulate IoT devices. However, I do think that probably in the next 6 to 8 months or so, we're going to see the needle move all the way close to 100% in terms of bad shit happening with IoT, and something is going to happen. And I hope that it's a smart decision and not just do nothing or regulate the snot out of it, but somewhere in between that makes sense. And that's my concern with the IoT. And there's a lot of articles about that out there today because there are botnets that are infecting systems that are claiming to do good, and there are botnets out there that are just breaking systems. And what happens when that hits something like healthcare, for example? I'm just ranting. Anyway.
Exactly.
Just ranting.
Yeah, ranting is good. That's right. I mean, no, you're right. I mean, it always gets serious. Yeah, I mean, years ago, right? We were like, oh, this hacking stuff is fun, right? But when there's no human safety life risk, yeah, it's fun. But, our industry has moved into a position of controlling people's lives. And, these botnets that run around, if they start affecting life and death, decisions or issues, yeah, that's a whole different space, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Really quick, last couple of stories. Researcher finds LastPass two-factor authentication bypass. I do want to say that there's like the stars have to align to exploit the vulnerabilities that could compromise LastPass's two-factor authentication. I think the one that this article from ZDNet skips over is that they have to have your password, first of all. and so that's like step one, which they kind of miss in this article. Step two.
Wait. Which password? Oh, your master vault
your master password for LastPass, right? Which
right.
I get, right? Like the reason we have two-factor is because we fear that someone could have our password. I get that.
Sure.
Provided that you're practicing good OPSEC and your LastPass password is separate from all your other passwords, and it's a really good passphrase, not a password, okay? The attacker, and I quote, would have to lure a user to a nefarious website or exploit cross-site scripting, right, which basically load code in your browser, essentially. Second, the user, like you as the user, have to be logged into LastPass for this attack to be valid. And basically what the researcher figured out, which I think is great research, is that your LastPass was using a hash of the user's password to generate the QR code that is used to set up two-factor authentication on the device, which is bad. Like, I know that's a lot to take in one sentence, but think about that. The way two-factor authentication is supposed to work, your password should be completely mutually exclusive from whatever your second factor is in your multi-factor authentication scheme, right? Bear
Absolutely.
with me. But there's a lot of other barriers to executing this attack, which I previously mentioned. So the other resounding news, and one of the reasons why I use LastPass, and I think the press has wrongly, in the case of Signal, which I made an update to the website for Hacked Ink and News, and I think in this case of LastPass, like the press tries to make more out of it than it really is. Like LastPass fixed this stuff. Like they just fixed it. As soon as they could, they fixed it. And it's not that big of a deal. So they implemented a cross-site request forgery token and are working on adding other protections to preventing this attack. And that's awesome for LastPass. So I will take the stance that using LastPass is still increasing your OPSEC more than not using LastPass. I also think similarly to, and we received communication from Moxie Marlinspike on Signal, it's along the same lines. Like the press made a big deal about, well, researchers found vulnerabilities in Signal. Now, Moxie came back and actually they made updates to their post, which I talked about in previous weeks. You guys probably saw the emails from Moxie on our internal mailing list. And what happened was Moxie was like, this is bunk. Like, yeah, they found vulnerabilities, but essentially the commonality that LastPass vulnerabilities and Signal have is like the environment they're operating in can be compromised and potentially affect the security of a secure messaging app or a password vault that implements two-factor authentication. That I believe is solely the case in this instance. So with LastPass, again, they're fixing the issues. With Signal, the issues from what Moxie has described, and I totally trust Moxie on this, and why shouldn't you? Because he's been on the show. I've had dinner with Moxie. Signal is awesome, and I'll explain why even further experts have validated it's awesome. It solely evolves from the fact that if someone takes control of your operating system, sure, they can affect the security of these other security applications like LastPass or Signal. when we talk about Signal specifically, not only did Moxie come out and say, hey, look, like, we're doing everything right. Number one, with Signal specifically, there was an independent code audit that said Signal is perfectly sound, security-wise. Mm-hmm. Number two, Phil Zimmerman was on the show last week. I believe it was last week. Phil was on the show, who was awesome.
It was last week.
In his own right. I asked Phil specifically about Signal, and Phil was like, dude, look, like, Signal's awesome. Like, their protocol is sound. In fact, like, Phil based some of his own protocols on Signal and spoke very highly of that. So, like, the dude that created PGP and established many of the protocols we use for email encryption and voice over IP encryption says, I analyze the Signal stuff and it's sound, makes me feel a lot better. My point in all of this whole tangent I'm going on is I am very skeptical of the press talking about these applications and pointing out security vulnerabilities, much in the way of Carlos does on this show, and bring us back down to reality, that these security vulnerabilities aren't a reason to panic, right? So I think the press has, and the Chrome vulnerability that also was involved with the LastPass, and the Signal vulnerabilities, I think, were overly hyped in the media. I apologize to some of our listeners because we covered those stories. I think after consuming all of the information, we bring us back down to reality that LastPass, Signal are examples of very secure applications that we should use and not believe the hype of the media in terms of their vulnerabilities. So.
Yeah, and one thing we have to realize is that a lot of these media sites, how do they make their money? Mm-hmm. By getting you to click on their page and going there right. So they can show you ads.
Yeah.
So you're going to see these headlines that are oh wow, kind of like CNN, Fox News. They put these headlines on the news, and then when you dig into the actual news article and you read everything, you go like, it's not what you were saying previously. In the case of LastPass, I have to applaud them.
Yeah.
Hey, stuff gets reported to you, and you fix it like that.
Dude, LastPass has a great reputation of fixing their vulnerabilities, right?
In fact, that's what I want to see.
Yeah.
You got to give them credit for that. I mean, they're responding appropriately and responsibly, which is all anybody could want. I mean, no security professional that I know is going to come out and say, yep, I've developed the perfect product that has absolutely no vulnerabilities. That's not going to happen, right?
Yeah, and I want to also give, we talked about LastPass and their two-factor authentication in a previous show, and Chuck Frayne, a fellow co-worker of mine at Tenable when I was at Tenable, pointed out that the YubiKey, the more expensive YubiKeys, I forget the name, they have NFC that can do the two-factor authentication on your phone. He very rightfully so pointed that out. I want to thank Chuck for that. It absolutely does work. If what I experienced is that process didn't work, I probably had NFC disabled on my phone, probably because I was going to a security conference, as we talked about. But that absolutely does work. In that light, and does the two-factor through YubiKey for LastPass. So I want to thank Chuck for pointing that out, as it's not a huge vulnerability. I wasn't presenting it as a big vulnerability in LastPass, just a usability thing as well. And it does fall back to another like Google SMS or whatever you have enabled in LastPass for your two-factor. So I think that's an important point as well.
Yeah.
Alrighty. That was all I had. Do you guys have anything else?
Yeah, we out of stories. Oh, I had a couple of announcements that we didn't do earlier.
Oh,
I guess
yeah.
I could do
your announcements, and then we'll gracefully end the show.
All right, sounds good. First announcement is that I am teaching SANS Sec 573 Automating Information Security for Python at SANS Northern Virginia in Reston, May 21st. So if anybody's interested in signing up for the Automating Information Security with Python class, please check that out at sans.org. The second announcement is that I'm going to be doing a related podcast, a webcast, on the 9th of May, where we'll be talking about some log analysis with Python. This is going to come out via Black Hills Information Security, the list that we've got for webcasts. So hopefully you're on that list. And we'll be doing that webcast right about I think it's 1 p.m. Eastern time on the 9th of May. So those are my announcements.
Awesome.
Back to you, Paul.
Thanks, Joff. Thanks, Carlos. Thanks, everyone, for listening and watching. That's been Paul Security Weekly. Over and out.